All right. I do believe we are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov. It is a great pleasure to be here with all of you guys today. We're going to be having another one of those different worlds that you would never expect to end up meeting up type of situations. We have Trisha Cuffari, aka Dan Fan, and we have Ramon Gill. Ramon, you are the head of Diversity Comic Con. You created Diversity Comic Con. And Dan Fan, you've been making videos about your opinions on comics. And of course, we have the wonderful, the one and only Masked Bastard joining in. We are going to have a couple of more people coming in as the stream goes on. Aydin Paladin is going to be joining us. Stardust is going to be joining us. I believe Gnostic Inform is going to be joining us towards the end as well. But anyway, listen, if you guys want to support what this is all about, BTR, what you have to do is subscribe right now, add a like. It's going to help the algorithm out tremendously, and sneed those super chats. That is very important. So anyway, I am going to start this off with Ramon. Ramon, please tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into Diversity Comic-Con, and also just your general stance on where you see social justice going in the world of comics. And we're going to start from there.
Okay, that's a lot of questions, but Diversity Comic Con. Let's see.
Well, first, a little bit about you, just so people have a bit of a background on who Ramon Gill is.
Okay, my name is Ramon Gill. I started off as a comic book illustrator back in the '90s. Discovered that I hated it and I couldn't make a living off of it, so I went into advertising for 20 some years, and then back in 2014, I decided to go back into it as a writer. But I just recently got my master's in illustrations, and I'm doing it as an artist as well. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
And the Diversity Comic Con, how did that come about?
Well, I teach at FIT in New York, and I'd always run this meetup group called a Comic Arts Workshop. And it's my way of networking with comic book professionals. It's a way for me to get to know them, because I don't go to a bar con. I don't go to the bars after the Comic Con, so I can't network there. And then while I was doing this, a good friend of mine, Fabrice Sapolsky, launched Jewish Comic Con in Brooklyn. And so my friends and he was telling me I should start an Asian Comic Con, and I thought about it, and then a friend of mine told me to go to this diversity workshop at FIT where we learn how to propose grants or grant proposals, make grant proposals. So it occurred to me that I could do a diversity Comic Con at FIT, and so I proposed it. And what was nice about it was that it's not like a regular Comic Con where I have to make money. It's basically a grant funded event. Right. So as long as people are learning and people are having a good time and FIT is getting some exposure, then that's fine. But the funny thing about Diversity Comic Con is that when I filled out the grant proposal, one of the other instructors told me that it's not going to get approved because it's got a money making component in it, which is against the rules. So I was thinking to myself, okay, that's darn. I guess I'll just try again next year, because I already submitted the proposal with a money making component. So I thought that was it. I wasn't going to get it, and then I get an email that says your proposal has been approved. Please come see the VP of Diversity. So I thought, what the hell is going on?
Wait, what's a VP of Diversity?
He's in charge of making sure that there are events that are diversity focused, making sure that there are programming, making sure that, I don't know about hiring or getting supplies, vendors and stuff like that, but definitely he made sure that there were things that were going on that were all about diversity. So anyways, I thought I didn't get this grant, but I did, and I couldn't figure out why I got the grant when I broke the rules. So I figured, okay, I'll meet with this guy, and I won't say anything about the money making part, right? And I showed up at his office, and the whole office was full of Batman memorabilia, and that's how I got the diversity.
There we go. He was a fan.
He really loves comics. He was a fan. Yeah,
that's great.
It worked out pretty well.
So as far as diversity goes, I want to go to Dan Fan a bit, but just your general opinion of what you see going on in the comic books industry today when it comes to not just diversity, but in general social justice. Where do you see
Uh,
social justice figuring in comics right now?
well, I think I need to clarify some things. First of all, there are two industries in comics today, right? There's the Marvel DC. That's one industry. Though we're talking about the mostly superhero stories, right? And then there's another industry called the original graphic novel industry, which is the thick bound books that are by like Raina Tagelmeyer and Dave Pilkey and other people like that. And these are self contained stories and not always and mostly not about superheroes. So there are two different industries. Now, the superhero comic book industry, right, has been around for like since the 30s. And it started out much more diverse as far as the kind of genres it had. And now you have basically mainly superheroes being produced by Marvel, DC, maybe Image, Dark Horse, IDW, and Dynamite. Right, I think those are the top ones. And in those cases, even though there was some social justice going on in previous decades, I think they poured it on now because now there's a commercial reason. Now, the problem with superhero comic books is that in the 90s, when they gave up selling at newsstands and supermarkets and went directly to direct market, they lost the ability to recruit young kids to read their comic books. Because if you think about it, like a 7-year old can go to the supermarket with their kids to pick up some comic books. But once comic books were only available in comic book shops, what 7-year old kid can travel 5, 6 miles to the nearest comic book store,
Hmm.
right? So
Absolutely.
they lost their ability to recruit young kids. And so, and then after the 90s, that's when comic books started getting really dark, right? It became more and more for mature audiences. And partly because of that, because they now have the same audience getting older and older and are getting new audience, but also because and I've talked to several creators who come in and they wanted to do grittier stories because these guys grew up on 80s and 70s Batman, right? And then they get into comic books for a dream, and then you know what? I want to make something that's different from like the old 50s, 60s style Batman. I want to make dark, gritty Batman, right? So you had creators who wanted to do more mature stories, and it just so happens that the audience was not growing. If anything, it was getting older and maybe even shrinking as people outgrew comics. And so that's part of the reason, not the only reason. That's part of the reason why you don't have print runs of right now. If a comic book makes 5,000 sells 5,000 copies, that's pretty considered pretty good. Whereas in the 70s and 80s, these comic books were making hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So that plus all the other things like video games and smartphones and the internet and cartoons 7 days a week now instead of just Saturdays. So all these compete with comics. So now you have these companies who are trying to either hang on to the audience they have, or they're thinking that maybe we can get a good audience by putting more diversity into the comic books. We'll do a black this, or we'll do a Muslim that, or we'll make this character a woman. I mean, I think I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I like it, but I think that the motivation is a little bit different when it comes to superhero comic books. Unlike graphic novels made by, and the business model here is different because in work, everything is work for hire, or at least with Marvel and DC. But with graphic novels, it's like the author model, wherein like book authors, like somebody creates a work and then the publisher licenses it to get it to print it, but the author keeps the rights to everything, right? And I think the authors that are coming out of the graphic novel industry are much more diverse, and their stories are much more personal because these are memoirs, these are coming of age, and so to me, because the authors are diverse and because the stories are authentic and of their own, to me that's a much more realistic or authentic use of diversity in the art form. as opposed to superhero comics, where it's all about, to me, it's all about the money.
Mm.
I mean, sure you have writers who they're bringing in who are diverse, and and often they grab these writers from the graphic novel industry, like Gene Lian Yang, who did that Chinese Superman. I mean, he did a Chinese graphic novel called American Born Chinese and some other ones for a long time before let's get this guy to do a Chinese Superman, and maybe we can get more Asian people to read Superman. So I mean,
Well,
I don't think
definitely, yeah. It
I'm all
definitely is all
for
about the money.
diversity. Yeah.
It definitely is all about the money when it comes to the corporate interest. My question would be more around the gatekeeping aspect of the publishers too, and we can get into that a little bit as well, as far as what are some of the things that end up being spread out the most from the publishers as opposed to more of the independent, like no publisher route, which I don't even know if that's possible. But I want to get to Dan Fan, get your experience on what Ramon was just talking about, as far as do you agree with him about the trajectory of the comics, as far as their audience becoming more of this edgier one, and now not really having that much of an audience as compared to when it did, as well as where do you see the social justice angle in the both professional DC Marvel comics as well as the graphic novels with the publishers. And also tell us a little bit about yourself as well, for all the people who do not know about the great Trisha Cuffari and her wonderful videos about reading the comics, including the one that I recently read about Catwoman with her poor cat, the father putting her poor little kitty cat on top of the door, and the cat falling, and for some reason it died because it fell down, which I didn't understand. But anyway, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I do indie comics myself. I make videos about the different comics, especially the DCYA comics, which are, yes, very, very awful. Uh, but to some extent, I can kind of see that. I mean, I grew up mostly in like the early 2000s, and when I was growing up, the most where we got comics would be in like the school library, or just a local library in general, or of course at those book fairs, which usually are run by Scholastic, I think. But yeah, and I never ever saw any like Marvel or DC comics included in the libraries or at these book fairs. And I think it was because they were aiming for like an older audience at that point in time. So I didn't actually get into reading them till like way later in my life. Uh, but yeah, what are the other questions? It's like the
Well,
whole.
the main one is the social justice angle. That's the big question here, as far as how much was that pivot because of this potential untapped market that the corporate interests were seeing there, and what exactly was the reaction? Because there are videos out there that talk about how, oh, there's all these SJW comics out there, and they're very unpopular, everybody hates them. Is that the case, or is that just being in a bubble, and really what is going on is there is this newfound audience for these comics? And
Right.
even if people may not agree with, people who don't like them may not agree with them, they do have their audience, and it's getting bigger and bigger because of various internet trends. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the whole social justice crowd is just like what evolved from what was like the more rebellious crowd, which you could argue starts at like the teenagers, the younger audience. They've been making movies and media that kind of follows the same trends that we're seeing today, but today it's just taken to such an extreme that it's too much. Uh, but I don't think that the audience is there so much anymore. The younger generation is, of course, changing, and eventually, like, what becomes the new norm is what's going to be rebelled against in the teenage phase. So if you're making this, the new norm, then people are going to be going against that. And I'm referring to a bunch of different things when I say that, of
Mhm.
course, not just like social justice, or there's just a lot of different talking points that are usually pushed in a lot of these younger comics that I've been reading. The most prominent being like protesting. Almost every single teenage comic that DC comes out with has the characters protesting. And I just feel like it's kind of ridiculous because, no one that I grew up with was ever interested in protesting. It's just like kind of something that they think, oh man, that's the rebellious thing to do is to protest. And it's like, no, we're not really that interested in that. Yeah,
Wait,
I don't
Ramon, do you concur with Dan Fan here on the protesting?
Yes and no. My kids protest, but they don't read comic books. So the audience, it's not the right audience. You're right. I think the comic books, because I don't read myself. I don't read superhero comic books anymore. I read mainly graphic novels. And so if you're saying that there's protesting going on in the superhero comic books, then I think you're right. I think people are. I don't think kids are reading superhero comic book. I think they're reading graphic novels. And so when Lev says that everybody hates them, I think most people who have been into superhero comic books for a long time, probably does hate them because there's such a departure from what the norm is. But like I said earlier, but I think younger audiences who are into social justice, the ones who do read comics are not reading superhero comics; they're reading original graphic novels. So.
Right. The DCYA brand, which is kind of like a spinoff, they're graphic novels themselves. They're just kind of like reusing the characters in a different type of story.
Yes, they probably are. I haven't read those either. I have seen them on the shelves. I don't know if they're reaching an audience. I know that kids are reading other things. They're reading a lot of manga. They're reading a lot of Raina Tagelmeier. Whether or not they're picking up the children's graphic novels from DC, I don't know. But I think that's smart on DC's part to try to get that audience. But I think a lot smarter than them making characters in the original mainstream universes into their I guess what they're converting them into people of color, which is fine. But I think that's not as smart a move as just creating graphic novels just for kids separately.
Well, I want to get Charlie Khan in this as well. Charlie, do you concur with what is going on right now that Ramon was talking about, Dan Fan was talking about? When it comes to this need to protest, is this mainly found in the graphic novels? And is this something that the other comics who are more Marvel, DC, try to go full, hey, fellow kids mode, and it's not really being as receptive? And what about the graphic novels in that case?
There's a big difference between, a brilliant social justice-y, like message of like tolerance and love. Like you look at the old Twilight Zones. Like those were brilliant stories that could tell you something without actually slapping you in the face with what it's really about. And
that was Sterling's on purpose from the beginning.
The problem with the modern Marvel comics and DC and all this stuff is the ham-fisted, like, no, this is what it is. All these legacy characters, we're just gonna sweep them off, into the background, like they're done. This is the guy now. And I feel like that's a problem. I feel like that you're going to lose a lot of the older audience that way. There's got to be a better way to introduce new characters who are what you want them to get somebody over. You can't just say, oh, hey, actually, Superman's done. Now his son's Superman. This is the guy. And then have him start doing all this wild non-Superman stuff. It's not going to work. Like people aren't going to go for that. Some people will. Some people will like it, but you're going to lose out on a lot of the legacy people, the real comic book buyers.
I think you're absolutely right.
And to cut people out to cut people out that have supported you for years. And when they complain about this kind of stuff, and even mild complaints, I'm not talking about, angry, mean-spirited stuff. I'm talking about like, hey man, I don't know if this is the right idea, Marvel. Like to just instantly slap them in the face with, no, actually, you guys are racist. You're awful. This is bad. You can't. How dare you complain? Like that's no good. That's how you lose a customer base, and that's a real problem. And to go back to what he was saying about the comic book stands, like the newsstands, like every store used to have comic books everywhere, and that was Stan Lee's big saying was that every comic book was some kid's first, and that was the way that he tried to write stuff so that you could pick up any comic book and get excited by it, and anybody in the world could get excited by it. And he even said, I think it was in one of the Stan Lee soapboxes somewhere where he went off about why Spider-Man was so popular worldwide is because anybody could be underneath that mask. Spider-Man could be whoever you wanted him to be for you. And there was something brilliant about that. But to change the core concepts of the characters, like I feel like that's a huge mistake. And manga is eating their lunch. Manga and I believe French comics are going to make a big comeback too. I think they're starting to really get over with people as people mature and start looking for other stuff. They start looking like these old heavy metals or the Tintin comics, that kind of stuff.
Now, what about the graphic novels? Before we go back to Ramon and Dan Fan, do you have any opinion there? Because Ramon was talking about how a lot of the more social justice-oriented audience, they're going into the realm of these particular types of comics. And I don't particularly know what is going on within that realm. I don't know, Charlie, if you've looked into it.
Well, if you think back, like there's even stuff like the Moss, like that was that's the Mice Holocaust book. Like that would count as this sort of stuff. Mouse, yeah. I forgive my accent. I as a person of country, I say things a little strangely, but you think about something like that. Like that's a great allegory for what he's going for. Without, it kind of is slapping you in the face with what it really is. But I feel like anybody can pick that up and look at it and go, oh, yes, this is, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down kind of thing.
Well, there's slapping in the face and then there's punching in the teeth.
Yeah.
And that may be the issue that we're facing right now, where, Ramon, I don't think there's that many people who are going to say, well, we only want there to be white people in comics and that's it. No, I think that when it comes to what I believe true diversity is, which is learning about different people's cultural backgrounds, various folk tales from different parts of the world, people are very excited about that. The perception that people have of what is going on within comics today, and I would include the graphic novels here as well, is that people may look different as far as there being different skin colors, different outfits, but they end up thinking the same. Their thought pattern happens to be much more left-oriented, happens to be much more anti-West, even though you could say that there are people who came to the West to flee a lot of the bad conditions that were in places where they came from because they liked what the West had to offer. And now it almost seems like a lot of these various comics are kind of spitting in the face of that and saying like, no, everything the West does is horrible and everything everybody else does is great. That appears to be the perception. I don't know how much that is in the graphic novels and the comics. From certain things I have seen, it does seem very ham-fisted in that direction, but I'm curious what you think.
Are you asking me or are you asking somebody else?
I'm asking you, Ramon.
I think you're right. I think there are always exceptions, obviously, and I don't like making generalizations. But a lot of the time, it does seem a little bit forced. But from a perspective of a writer of color, if DC calls me right now and says, we want to make an Asian version of this character, I'll say yes, right? Because it's an opportunity for me, right? And all of us creators want to work for, even sometimes we say we don't want to work for Marvel and DC, and I'm sure there's people out there who absolutely will not. But that's the dream, right? That's what we grew up with, Marvel and DC. So if somebody, if an editor called me up and say we want to make a story about a Filipino daredevil, I'll say yes, And I'll do my best to try to make it work, right?
No, but here's the difference, though. You could have a story about the Filipino daredevil incorporating various cultural things of your choosing. The difference, though, is when there would be a Filipino daredevil who would constantly be talking ill about the United States or about colonialism, like talking about various things that, like, yes, they happen in history, but a lot of it seems oriented right towards the West, and that seems to be the thing that really turns people off.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Say that again.
Okay, instead of me saying it, because I'm the moderator here, I'm going to go to Dan Fan. I don't know if you could expand about what I'm talking about here. Just so I don't want to put...
like all the anti-American stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Just so we're a little bit clear, because again, this is not about diversity being a bad thing. This is more about diversity being the skin suit that is worn by something that I think is not just unproductive, but kind of a very bad agenda, an agenda that divides people. But I don't know, Dan Fan, can you expand a little bit on this?
Yeah, I don't know. There's definitely a lot of like pro-communism stuff in like the modern stuff. The classic critiques on capitalism and all that other crap. But and then not trying to steer the conversation in the direction that you had planned, but my mind is going all over to different places. So yeah.
All right, no problem. While you're thinking about that, Charlie Kahn, do you want to take over here?
I think people, I remember a time when everybody would cheer when Spider-Man lands in front of the American flag in the movie. Like, people used to love this country. I don't know what happened. I don't know what changed. Like, that used to be the thing. Even pro wrestling, which is very much comic books brought to life, like before the movies, you would see a lot of guys like waving the American flag, and you would have the bad guys who would have those sorts of criticisms and be that character. You look at something like Killmonger, the popular bad guy from Black Panther. Like, seeing people loving that character and the way that they wanted to go about things is very like I feel very uncomfortable with that, because that whole guy's thing was about violence, and it's like, whoa, buddy, like let's chill out here a minute. Like, he's the bad guy. You're supposed to be rooting for the Black Panther who wants to, diplomatically solve things. Violence is not the answer that he wants to go to. I feel like that's a problem. That's a problem with writing and presentation there. I feel like there's something, and maybe that's audience expectations. Maybe there's something in people where they just, I don't know, they want violence now, and I don't think that's the right way to go.
I don't know, Ramon, what do you think? Do you think that there is this energy in the air? We've seen it a bit in the 2020. Do you think that there is this tendency of people to want to tear down the system? What is your opinion of that? Because even though it goes a little bit away from comics in general, it is this aspect that I think is very divisive that people end up inserting into comics.
I think there is a little bit of that, on both sides, I would say, but I don't think it's that prevalent. I think it's more visible now that we have social media. I'm sure we had all these people who wanted to tear down the system for decades, but we never heard from them because we didn't have social media. And now we have social media, and we have podcasts, and we have tweets, and we have Facebook, and we have blogs. And back then, it's like all these people, you only heard about them if you were subscribed to their hard copy newsletter, right? Or what you went to their meetings. But now they're everywhere because you can see them online just through your computer or through your iPhone.
But there is also
like
a question.
A virus.
Well, yeah. There is also a question of the gatekeeping here, because if you are these institutions, be it the publishers of the graphic novels or be it Marvel and DC, you could say that you have a certain responsibility to steer culture in a particular direction that does not end up dividing people. I think somebody wrote in the chat earlier on that in the 90s, that was in a way social justice done right, where, we had diversity as far as like Blade, for example. Even though the introduction for me to Blade was the movie, nobody, at least as far as I was aware, was talking about, oh, hey, there's this black superhero. It's more about, hey, Blade is cool.
Yeah,
It doesn't
Blade
matter.
What makes Blade cool is not that he's a black dude. Like Blade, him being black is the 8th thing on the list of things that are cool about Blade. And I feel like with this pandering social push, there could come a time where they're like, you know what? What if Blade was a small Taiwanese woman? Like, why does Blade have to be this guy? And it's like, whoa, you're changing the core concept of the character here. Like him being, Wesley Snipes, like that's core to the character. And if you lose that, you're losing a big piece of who that character is.
But Ramon, you were saying in the mid there. Can you repeat what you want to say there?
I was just going to say that when Blade came out in the 90s, there was no social media. So if people were offended by it or didn't like the change, we didn't know about it.
I'd say
Blade,
if there was social media, what I would say is that there's nothing in Blade, at least that I can recall, that's reminiscent of anything that has to do with Marxism or protesting or any social justice movement. It's just about this cool dude who kills vampires. And that is, in a way, I think, what people like about Blade and what they feel in certain comics that end up coming up, that they do hit you with they do hit you in the teeth, politically speaking. And that, I think, is kind of up to the people who are the gatekeepers, the DC and Marvel, to either double down on or stop. There are companies right now like Coinbase, I think, and others who start to make a completely non-political system within their, within how people work. So people will talk about programming, they would talk about various things related to the work, the missions at hand, but they're not going to talk about politics within the workplace. And I think in a way it's freed up a lot of people. It also allowed some people who wanted it to be much more about politics to get a very nice severance package and then go work somewhere else. But I think there's going to be a lot of pressure, not so much because now we have social media, and I agree with you, social media has allowed more people to talk about this stuff, but it's also, I think, allowed minority to put so much pressure on these entities that if they don't insert political things in there, if they don't kowtow, then there's going to be a problem. I don't know, at least this is from my non-comic industry outsider looking in view. So I'm curious, Ramon, if you agree or disagree with what I'm saying as far as that kind of political pressure right now towards the gatekeepers.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is money. If they can get a wider audience by having more diversity in there, they will. As far as groups pressuring media to have more diversity, I don't know if that happens, but I have a very strong stance against that. Not because my feeling is in this day and age, and I've been involved with this before. In this day and age, we don't need to wait for mainstream media to reflect that our diversity, our culture. The technology exists today that we can fucking make our own media.
Absolutely.
Right? And back in the 2000s, I think it was, I'm a graphic designer by day. And
you're actually real superhero by night, right?
No, just comic book creator. So I was helping this guy with this newsletter. And it was all about complaining about not enough Asians in this movie, not enough Asians in that movie. And what I noticed is when I don't agree with what I'm working on, I'll make a lot of typos and mistakes. And so he eventually fired me. But it's like I'm not gonna wait or beg or plead or pressure some company to put more Asians in their books or TV shows. I've made my own movies. I make my own comic books. I read my own stories. All of them feature Asian Americans as lead characters. Fuck those guys if they don't want to put Asians in their stories. That's and maybe that's a strong word, but that's as an artist, it's like don't tell me what to put in my what to do with my stories, right? And so I would give them the same the same latitude. It's right. It's their stories. It's their property. So they can do with it whatever they want. I want diversity. I'm going to make my own media that's got diversity in it. So
Excellent.
that years ago, I heard this story that Clint Eastwood did this World War II film. I think of Iwo Jima or something like that. Some island where the Americans were.
Well, he did I think he did two movies. He
Yeah,
did
it's,
one from the perspective of the
Flags of Our
Japanese.
Fathers.
Yeah, Flags of the Fathers. That was from the perspective of the American soldiers at Iwo Jima, and the other one was from the perspective of the Japanese. So it was very interesting.
Right, but supposedly Spike Lee publicly said that Clint Eastwood should have included African American soldiers in his movies, and Clint Eastwood responded, Spike Lee should shut his face. Right? It's like, to me, it's like if Spike Lee wants to see African American soldiers in the movie, he should make that movie, right? It's not Clint Eastwood's responsibility to represent every group that's out there. He just wanted to make the movie that he wanted to make, and I respect that. And as much as I'd love to see, we've had movies, World War II movies with African American lead characters, and that's great, but I wouldn't tell another artist, how to do their story to include diversity.
Well, there's also a question of historical authenticity, too. I mean, there were definitely black soldiers in World War II, no question about that. It's more of the question of where was who stationed and how important is that. So, for example, there are movies that are made right now, and I'm sure with comics it's the same deal, where they take place somewhere in Europe in the Middle Ages or somewhere in England during the Tudor, say, Shakespearean time.
Earth?
Yeah, or Middle Earth. I mean, that's the most. Although that is a fantasy, that is a
Prime has pushed.
Yeah, but to be fair, that is a fantasy, and you could say, well, in the fantasy, people can be whatever.
Sure.
But I guess a retort to that retort would be that J.R.R. Tolkien based his fantasy specifically on a European landscape, and also there are certain rumors out there that he may have based a lot of his stories on various legends from Europe that have, that actually existed. I mean, I'm not going to go too deep into the rabbit hole as far as whether Lord of the Rings is real. We're not going to do that.
How about in the Thor movies where the Asgardians are very diversely raced? Like that seemed that felt like an odd choice to me.
I don't know, Ramon. Like, where do you stand on putting diversity into elements where it may not make as much sense, both historically or even in the realm of fantasy, if the fantasy is based on a particular lore? Like, let's say, for example, somebody made a version of, I don't know, Journey to the West, like Dragon Ball Z, that was based on Journey to the West, and it had a lot of diverse characters in it, so it didn't matter. But then if you take like an Indian epic, for example, like the Ramayana, for example, and you would put, white
the
people...
Wayans brothers.
Yeah, or the Wayans brothers into the Ramayana. Where do you see that?
The actual, I guess, brown or washing of the characters, I have no problem with. If it's done well, and even if it's not done well, it's not really, it's none of my business how they do it. But I will say that, that Cleopatra was an Egyptian, not a white woman. Jesus Christ was not a white person.
Oh, no. Cleopatra, no, not Cleopatra. Cleopatra, she was the daughter of Ptolemy, and Ptolemy was Greek. Well, technically speaking, he was in the team of Alexander the Great. So
was she a full-blooded white person?
Well, it depends on whether you would, Charlie, would you consider Greeks or Macedonians, for that matter, white?
But she was half Egyptian, right?
I don't know. Was she? I gotta look this up. But that's an interesting question.
But anyway, I guess my point is that Hollywood and the media have been whitewashing for decades.
Yep.
So nobody complained about it then. So why are people complaining about the opposite now?
I feel like people had strong opinions about John Wayne playing Genghis Khan. I think people had a lot of thoughts at the time, like that was a huge mistake.
Mickey Rooney playing a Japanese guy on The Graduate. So
that one in particular just feels bad. That
to
one
me,
feels
so
awful.
to me, it's like it's two sides of the same coin. You know, people have been changing ethnicities of characters for decades. So if you know if so to me that's it's I don't care. They can do it all they want. I like it. I like the fact that the Asgardians were diverse. You know, and who's to say that we think that every culture back in the Middle Ages or whatever were pretty homogenous. They probably were, but there were people who were able to travel from the Middle East or from Asia to other
Yeah, there's the
continents.
famous story of the Black Samurai.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know
Or
about that. Tell me about this Black
yeah.
Samurai.
Oh, you don't know about the Black
Oh,
Samurai?
oh wait a minute.
He's
No.
the
I know that there were samurai who were black, but I didn't know about one particular black samurai.
there's the one that when I believe it was Nobunaga, when he found the guy, like he was, yeah, I think this is it. It's a man of African origin who served as the retainer and weapon bearer for the Japanese daimyo Oda Nobunaga. Yeah, he's the one that Nobunaga had never seen like dark skin before and thought that he had like covered himself with something and tried to like pull it off of him. And he had to explain to him, like, no, actually, this is just who I am, man.
Wow. Well, there is another black conquistador that I want to talk about a little bit here. But before that, a comment from the great Philip Daniel, friend of the show. No, they intermixed with Persians, though. He's talking about Cleopatra and Ptolemy before her. Back then, Persians were likely more Indo-European. So in a way, like when we're talking about the age of Heraclitus, for example, who was living in not ancient Greece, but he was living in a Persian colony in ancient Greece. At that point, even if there were different religions, there was a lot of intermixing going on. So kind of like the people that you were talking about, who are the ancient Greeks and who are the ancient Persians, they wouldn't be as far away from each other, I believe, at that point. But anybody in the chat, please correct me. So basically, my point is that Cleopatra, I guess, would be considered to be white if we're talking about Cleopatra. But as far as the Black Conquistador, this is an interesting guy. This is not some. Have you ever heard of Juan Garrido, Ramon? Okay, so he was a black African Spanish conquistador. So he went to Portugal as a young man. He was from the Kingdom of Congo, which is present-day northern Angola. And he converted to Catholicism, chose the Spanish name Juan, and he joined the Spanish expedition to Santo Domingo, Hispaniola in 1502. He participated in the invasion of present-day Puerto Rico and Cuba in 1508. In 1513, as part of Juan Ponce de Leon's entourage in search of gold, the expedition landed in Florida. He is the first known African to arrive in North America. By 1519, he had joined Cortez's forces and invaded present-day Mexico, participating in the siege of Tenochtitlan. He married and settled in Mexico City, where he was the first known farmer to have sowed wheat in America. He continued to serve with Spanish forces for more than 30 years, including expeditions to western Mexico and to the Pacific. So this is a very interesting dude, and it boggles my mind why we don't hear about him in the history books. Like, I was not even aware of this guy until maybe a couple of years ago. But I don't know. Charlie, I want to get to Dan Fan as well. I think Ramon's kind of frozen in the sheet of ice right now, so hopefully his connection's going to improve. But why do you think that people like Juan are not as often mentioned in the history books? Or in the modern, let's say, school system as opposed to the history books, rather?
See, I feel like cool and interesting characters are often lost to history. There's a lot of that, like the Black Samurai. Like nobody really talked about that story. I found out about it because it was a movie that the actor that played T'Challa in the Black Panther, he was working on a movie about it. Like he was going to do that movie and be that character, and it was like, oh man, that would have been a really cool movie to have seen. But you know, certain things just get lost to history.
Absolutely. And speaking of getting lost to history, Ramon is back with us over here. There was a problem with the internet. Ramon, are you with us? Can you hear us? Where did you hear up to?
Yeah, I can hear.
Excellent. But where did you hear up to?
I think. Oh gosh.
Did you
Part
hear
about RoboCop?
No, I did not hear about RoboCop.
Did you hear about the black conquistador? Did you hear
Yeah,
about the black?
I got the Black Conquistador, and then
Yes.
I think Charles started talking, and then that's when I cut out.
All right. There we go. So yeah, so as far as the Black Conquistador goes, that would be a very interesting comic book character as well. And the reason why I bring somebody like Juan up is that I think that there was this tendency, or has been this tendency, to portray people of color, as they are called today, which I don't know, to me that's a very strange term as well. It reminds me a bit of colored, I don't know.
Yeah,
But
that always seemed like the racist to me too. Like growing up, like that was like you don't say that about people. Like that's old timey and mean. And now everybody's saying the backwards of it. Like that's what is that?
well, I mean, be that as it may, for me it's more about how, I mean, you could even say even the term in a way, and maybe you'll disagree with me about this, Ramon, but in a way, the term and the general way that people of different racial characteristics are portrayed, it's almost like they can't be the conquistador. They can't be someone who is imperialistic. Even though empires, as you know, have existed in all countries around the entire world, before, during, and after Europeans. And I don't like the fact that people who are minorities are being portrayed as this victim group, are being portrayed as, someone who cannot, stand up, if that makes any sense. It almost seems like they're being portrayed as these kind of like pets of the white saviors, like we always have to, what's the right word here? We have to pat them on the back, say how wonderful they are, how good they are, and I think it's very demeaning.
It feels like you're putting everybody in the same box, and that's not
Yeah.
necessarily that's not good. I don't like that. Like lumping everybody in, saying, like oh, we're different, so that makes us different, like better. Like I don't get it. Like it just doesn't seem like the right thing to say. Like one day I hope we get to the point where people have to say, well, I'm a person of Earth, I'm a human being. I feel like we're going to get there maybe in 1,000 years, maybe 100,000 years. We'll eventually get there where everybody talks shit about, those damn Martians, buddy. You know how the Martians are.
Well, to be fair, the Martians are actually the Nazis, the breakaway Nazi civilization.
The ones you got to watch out for is the Venusians, though. They're real sneaky.
Exactly. No, but Ramon, yeah.
Actually, right now, the Martians are a completely different race. In reality, they're all robots right now.
Well, the robots
They'll
are the
break your
Greys.
finger if you're playing chess against them. You got to watch out.
That's true. The robots are the Greys, which were invented by the... I'm not going to get into it right now. But I'll save that for a little bit later down the stream. When we have enough to drink, then I'm going to start talking about Operation High Jump. I'm going to be talking about how the moon is actually artificially made in order for the Earth to be on its tilt, in order for the Martian Nazi time travelers to go to the Earth and to start seeding civilization and creating this weird time loop. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that right now.
Comic books and how far out comic books could go.
Yes, exactly. Getting back to comic books, though, what we're talking about right now, Ramon, like Charlie and myself, and I think Dan Fan as well, if you're still with us over here, is coming from more of the side of the internet that's reacting to a lot of things that we see being perpetuated more within the sphere of, you're in FIT, more in the sphere of education, more in the sphere of real life, certain things that people don't really, as far as I see, have that much of a chance to talk about, which is why I think it's incredibly important that you're here with us right now to, again, like Break the Rules always does, try to merge these two sides together. So what Charlie especially was talking about, like this lumping everybody into this one people of color type thing, do you notice that has also been going on from your perspective?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of promoting of stereotypes, essentially. And you definitely see that in a lot of modern comics where they don't just want to include diverse groups, but they want them to act a certain way, too. They want them to be a certain character type. And then, of course, they want at least one white person to stand up for them when they need help.
Hmm.
It's very cliche and tropey at this point. because it exists in so many of them.
Well, Ramon, again, like, what are some of your thoughts here as far as these things that we're talking about?
Like I said, I don't read a lot of comic books, mainstream comic books nowadays, but I have
I
seen
don't
it.
think anybody
I
does
have
anymore.
I have seen what Dan Fan is talking about. But what I will say is that there's a lot of indie comic books out there that are produced by, Latinos and African Americans and Asians. And in those comic books, the those characters are the lead. They are not token characters. They are not background sidekicks. And if you're only reading Marvel and DC, then yeah, you're probably gonna see that. But if you were to pick up an indie comic book, and there's hundreds of them out there, you will find that there is real diversity going on there. There are real fleshed out characters of color in there.
Well, as far as the lead characters go, Dan Fan, one of the comics that you were recently reviewing or reading, whatever is the right word here, is, I don't remember what it's called, but it's about Wonder Woman's twin sister. We were talking about it a little bit last night. So there you have a lead who is black, but as far as how, she was obviously the leader there, the story was about her. But as far as certain themes that you saw cropping up in there, can you talk a little bit about what you saw? And then I would love to compare that to certain comics that, Ramon, you would offer up as examples of this being done right.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've read Nubia. It was Nubia Real One, that was the
Yes.
title. But basically, she doesn't know that she's Wonder Woman's twin sister. She, has superpowers and whatnot. She's being raised by two lesbians. I don't remember their names, but it's a lesbian couple who are raising her. And she stops a robbery by hitting one of the robbers with an ATM. But for some reason, nobody knows that she did that, so they just assume that she's one of the thieves. And I don't know how they missed it, but so she gets detained by a police officer at one point. Then he lets her go, and
she also said that they'd never detain Superman like that, right? Like that's.
Oh yeah, of course. It's she, in her mind, a lot of her misfortune is because she is black, and yeah, that's kind of just the theme of the comic. I'm trying to remember bits and pieces of it. I know that she had a bully at school who was interested in her friend. I don't remember. It's so hard to.
And I do remember one part in that comic where her other friend said, want me to kick this guy's ass. You remember? Is it coming back to you?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But
at some point, she fights him. He's drunk at a party, and he takes a swing at her, and she dodges it. And then she's about to walk away from the fight, but then decides, you know what, fuck it. And then she just punches him in the face, and they get it on video. So they have proof that she assaulted him. And that turns into a big thing that causes her a lot of backlash. And of course, she's like, it's because I'm black. And for some reason, the bully kid turns into a school shooter at the end of it. I don't know why. It just it escalated very quickly.
Why would comic books want to go there of all places? They're supposed to be fun. You can't have fun with that. That's awful.
Oh,
well, according to the comic,
protest in that
yes,
comic as well, and she fought the cops because the cops were evil, I guess. I don't know.
All right, so basically what this paints to, I'm not even going to say what it paints to me. Ramon, what does this paint to you?
Well, I'm actually of the thinking is that, people can do whatever they want. There is no, one of the words I hate the most is should. Things should be this way. Things should be that way. I think everybody, even companies and independent artists and creators, are free to do whatever they want. If you don't like it, don't read it. So
that is fair enough, but there is room, I think, for criticism. As far as Dan Fan's channel, she is also free to criticize and to point out certain things that don't work in the comic.
Same thing. Dan Fan is perfectly free to. She can do whatever she wants as well. I'm not going to do that. I mean, I'm going to make my own comic books.
Mhm.
To hell with everybody else, what they're making or what they want to see made. I'm making my own comic books, right? I mean, I don't, I may offer my opinion about something, but in the end, everybody is free to do whatever they want, whether they want to criticize or whether they want to create. I just want to create.
I guess what I'm trying to get to here is I don't think that there is this chaotic soup of everybody doing various different things. You have companies over here doing one thing, these other companies doing another thing. And I guess this sounds a little bit conspirological, but I don't really think it is. I think it's just more people deciding to go with whatever is not going to cause trouble. Like you're at a party, you're at, I don't know, a fundraiser for a particular political party. You're not going to talk shit about that political party.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going on with Marvel and DC, but like I said, there's a bunch of other independent comic books out there that aren't doing it that way. That they
Yeah,
don't
look
mind. They
at
don't mind rocking the boat. They don't mind offending. They don't mind, going against the norm. But if you're
look at
just going to read
this.
Marvel and DC, then that's what you're going to see. You're
You can
right.
look at the success of guys like what Eric July's been up to. I think he's up to $3 million now. I know he passed 2 million. Like he's trying to build his own thing and do his own company, and like good for him, man. Like everybody should. The Ninja Turtles weren't made by a corporation. It was made by two guys sitting in their living room, drawing cartoon pictures with one another, laughing. They got it published, got it sold, parlayed it into a tabletop book and miniatures and toys, and then a cartoon, and then old Jed's a millionaire. Like it just keeps going from there.
But you brought up Eric July. Is he related to Comicsgate, or is that a separate thing?
I feel like that's a separate thing. I think what those guys are doing and what he's doing are a little different from one another. But again, like I said, it's an alternative. Those guys are doing their thing, and more power to them. If they've got an audience that wants to pay for their books, that's sort of their thing.
The reason why I brought up this not being so much of a complete chaotic soup of randomness, even though I completely agree with you, Ramon, that we do have these various independent outlets right now, probably much more than we had in the past, where we are free to express ourselves in different ways. The issue I get to here is that the internet, because of the way things are set up right now, at least with social media, even if you do get a modicum of success and you're able to find your own people, you're still going to have, just like, for example, you have companies that are subsidized by the United States government where they end up profiting much more. Same like during the lockdown, for example, you had Walmart not really going out of business. You had certain companies that...
Amazon thrived.
Yeah, Amazon. You have certain companies that are going to make it because they are very much supported. So my concern here is not so much about there not being an opportunity to express yourself. It's more about that Brave New World as opposed to 1984 idea where you don't have to get rid of information. You just have to flood the market with so much stupidity, so much useless information that people are not going to know, their head from their ass. And when it comes to companies that are big enough to be able to fund certain projects, like, for example, I don't know, the Star Wars movies, which, again, I don't want to go too much into movies here, but these are movies that are made from comics, so I kind of see it as a similar thing. When you have so much influence coming from the top there, it does, I think, end up putting certain amount of pressure even to certain people within the graphic novel sphere, at least people who want to maintain good company in terms of people who they know in academia, for example, people at FIT, basically people within a world like New York City, for example, the social world of New York City, where I don't think it would be as easy to get somebody there who may have more of a right-wing perspective when it comes to, their idea of what a comic should be. Like, do you see what I mean? Like, there seems to be more pressure.
I see what you're saying, but in the end, and I've struggled with this because the first couple of years of my resurgent comic book career, I was thinking about all these things. I was thinking about, well, you have the big companies who basically dominate, you have marketing, you have sales, you have all these things to worry about. But if you think about it, assuming everything you're saying is true, aside from what can I do about it, right? There are things I can do about it. So I can vote. I can produce media that counteracts that. Um, yeah, and I'm already doing those things already, right? So so beyond that, we can talk about it, till forever. But in the end, it's like, what are you going to do about it? And I'm doing something about it in my own way. Um, I don't know if I'll be successful. I don't know if it's going to, I don't know if it's going to change the industry or change the world. But I'll do what I'm doing, and just do the work and not worry about those things. I mean, I know those things are there, but I'll just do what I can. And in the end, that's all there is. That's all I can really do. So,
Well, can you
so yeah,
talk
I'm
a
not
bit?
sure that
Can you talk a little bit about what the things that you are doing are, as far as the ideas for the comics you have? What exactly inspires you? What exactly you want to put out to the world?
I'm not a big social justice person in terms of my stories. I don't inject a lot of social justice, but I do make my characters in my books very diverse. You know, the stories that I write are not about culture. You don't have it doesn't have to be. It's like, sure, I have a Filipino American lead character, but the story is not about him being Filipino American. It's just about him being like a crime fighter. Just so happens to be Filipino American. That's the kind of stories I want to write. I guess I could write more social justice stories. I could write stories about his culture or him defending other Filipino Americans. But you know what? I have no interest in that. Right? This is the kind of story I want. I want to write a detective story that stars an Asian guy or an Asian girl. Right? I want to do a police body cop story, a buddy cop story, and the characters are Asian. That's what I want to do. But it has nothing to do with them being Asian. It's not about being discriminated against, things like that. Those are the kinds of things that I want to work on.
Mm.
There's all this stuff, other stuff going on, right? And we all have to decide for ourselves. Well, which fights are we going to take on? And sure, there's a big corporate, the big corporate entities that dominate comic books, right? And this is the way I'm going to fight it. But but beyond that, it's like, if somebody feels very strongly that the big companies are dominating the genre or the media or the art form, then do something about it. And just and talking about it is great, and bringing it to light is great. But in the end, it's like, we can talk about it until our ears fall off. At some point, we have to take action.
Absolutely, and who better to take action than the wonderful Stardust joining Break the Rules. Stardust, it's always a great pleasure to see you. I see you've gotten rid of the orange, and you've brought back more of the blue and the purple. What's going on? What inspired this color change all of a sudden?
I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you wonderfully, yes.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so I just figured I'd change it up a bit. So yeah, that's about it. How are you guys doing today?
Doing fine, doing fine. Here's Ramon, Charlie, Dan Fan. Everybody is in the house over here. And Stardust, I've missed you on BTR. It's always a great pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I want to get your opinion as well on what we've just talked about right now. We were talking about diversity, social justice in comics, where Ramon was talking about how even though corporate entities want things to be done in a certain way, people are free, as far as independent publishing goes, to do things their way, to much more than probably we were able to do before the advent of the internet. But I wouldn't say it's a counter argument necessarily, but the only thing I would add to that is that I still think that there is a lot of social pressure, even in independent works. If you are somebody who is, I'd say both, like, if you're a Trump supporter who's in Florida or somewhere in the South and you're in comics, there's going to be much more pressure for you to make, like, Agent Poso. Charlie, know Agent Poso, Jack Posobiec's thing?
What's that? What was it, Lev?
Agent Paso. It was like this comic that Jack Posobiec made. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
No, I didn't know that. He's the Veritas guy, right?
No. He's not although I think he's associated with them. But anyway, the point being is that you have pressure on the right to, for example, I find like there's a lot of pressure right now to be very negative towards NATO. for some reason. Because I think that there's a lot of Russian operatives that managed to sneak their way onto the
So
right.
I'm seeing a lot of United Nations memes, a lot of that kind of stuff, like calling them the Antichrist and things like that.
Yeah, sure. Well, United Nations, I don't really care too much about the United Nations. NATO is much more important. But anyway, that being said, the point is that I think that there is this pressure that's coming from both the left and the right in order for you to be a certain way. And Stardust, even when it comes to people who are, let's say, living in New York City, like Ramon is, for example, or like I am, and if you want to have a career within this kind of industry, and I know this may be a little bit further away from discussion, but I'm still curious if you have any takes on this. How shackled are you to having your content have the social justice message if you are in an urban environment, if you are on the in the coast?
So I guess it would depend on what do you mean by social justice message, right? If we're talking about a diverse comic book, I don't really see that as a social justice message. I see that as, well, we've got a pretty diverse American makeup now, and it just seems like you're going to try and appeal to the most amount of people, and you're going to use diversity to do that. Do I think diversity for diversity's sake can be cringe? Yeah, it can be cringe. But at the same time, we know that there have been studies done on like young black girls, the doll study, for example, where they gave them a white doll and a black doll, and these young girls were basically saying that the black doll was ugly, and these were like black children, right? And so I do see a benefit in there being diversity in comics and in other media. Obviously, it shouldn't be too forced, but if there's like a way to bring it in, I don't see why not. So many people grow up feeling like they're not normal. I guess they're not the normal, the norm in America. I think it's nice to kind of expand what the norm is. And I guess I would also say, in addition to that, I see a lot of pushback against like diversity in not only on the right, but I see it on the left too, because the left is always saying like, oh, it's just it's woke capitalism, they're using us and all of that. I don't know about that, because I feel like or they'll get like really irritated that something's not completely correct, right, with the thing. For example, Princess Jasmine, right, is like, you can't tell where she's from. It's very ambiguous, right? You just know general region, but it's like that on purpose, right? Like Princess Jasmine was made that way on purpose to appeal to the broadest amount of people. Same thing with
Dora the Explorer.
I don't know about Dora the Explorer, but yeah, there are a few others, but yeah, I just it's just I think that there's some utility in it, and I see where from a looking at they're doing this is a lot of money to put into a project, right? They wouldn't be putting that money in there if it wasn't going to be profitable in some sort of way, and if there wasn't some studies on the audience that would view that favorably. So
that's a good question, though, as far as profitability goes, because there is this score that I think it was done in part by this guy named Larry Fink. I'm going to have to take a look at what exactly it is. But certain companies, they have to conform to certain standards of like a certain racial makeup or certain diversity goals, social justice goals. I have to look. It's like ESG. I think that's what it's called. I'm going to look up exactly what it is. But that's more of like the pressure that I'm talking about. Not so much social pressure, but actual company pressure, not so much from the bottom line, but more from...
But they still have to look at... Yeah, so sure, we can definitely say that. And I again will say, like, diversity for diversity's sake, kind of cringe, But again, I don't think that the makeup of the company is necessarily going to influence the company into making bad monetary decisions. They're still going to look at, like, they're going to look at the testing. They're going to look at the testing that they do with audiences. And they're going to look at, like, surveys and things like that before they make a decision to dump a lot of money into something, right? So yes, while there may be these diversity quotas within the company itself, this is still reliant on the market and on the audience.
I don't know. Dan Fan Charlie, do you guys, as well as Ramon, do you guys agree with that? Any pushback on that note?
I mean, the companies are going to do what they're going to do. Like if they've got quotas of stuff that's coming from the top down, I mean, it is what it is. Like that's the decision they've made to go with, and whether or not that's the right decision, their sales will reflect that. And maybe it's not about having mass market sales, because Netflix's whole thing was targeting niches. That was what they wanted. They wanted juggalos. They wanted their version of 1,000 super fans who would love their products forever, rather than a million people that just, kind of like it. That's what they wanted. And that was the model that they've kind of gone with for the last few years. And maybe that'll work out long term. Maybe it won't. Maybe that connects with people better. Because I was talking about that, what I found to be a rather dumpy adaptation of She-Ra. But people that loved it. And, if they love it, more power to them. Like, they can love it.
Well, that kind of brings us to the question of the thumbnail of the video, which is the social justice comics the future? I know in the beginning, Sardis, you weren't here, but we were talking with Ramon about whether the corporate comics are being more popular, less popular. And Ramon, as you said, among the comic fans, the OG fans, a lot of these corporate comics, not really doing it, but a lot of the people who are into more of the social justice themes, as you said, they end up going for the graphic novels. What I'm curious, though, about is whether it's graphic novels or comics or whatever, or movies for that case. I don't, obviously nothing private having to do with, your family. But as far as the environment that you're seeing in New York City among the kids who are growing up right now, you mentioned that there is an interest in protesting. Where do you think a lot of that comes from? Because if it's not coming from the corporate comics, then is it coming from the schools? And yeah, I'm just curious about that part. Like, how do you think young people are being shaped today? And do you think that they are going to end up being shaped today towards more social justice, at which point a lot of these comics will become much more popular? Oh, and you're muted right now, so you got to unmute yourself.
You're asking me, right?
Yes.
I think you can't really paint things with a broad brush. My kids, we're a pretty liberal family, so my kids are pretty liberal. My daughter went to LaGuardia High School for the Arts, which is very liberal, right? But I have a student, a comic book creator, who lives out in Long Island, and he tells me all his friends and coworkers are very conservative. So you can't really paint a broad brush as everybody. It really depends on where people are growing up, and
Exactly.
What their parents are doing and what their friends are
But
doing.
But in a way, this is a very important thing, though, because see what you mentioned. You mentioned Long Island. You could have said Staten Island. The moment you would have said Staten Island, I would have said, well, of course they're going to be Republican. There are certain places where people are the way that they are. This is why I mentioned the coastal areas. I mean, people do have, people on the right have this, saying of the quote-unquote coastal elites. That's how they call all the people that they hate, that they end up seeing as making all of these globalistic decisions for them and getting rid of the working class in the United States for international yada, yada, yada. So that is how they see people on the coast. But as far as the word liberal goes, this is where it gets interesting for me. I consider myself to be a liberal. Classic liberal. I want to put the word classic in before, and that's something that Stardust, as you know, liberals do who are dissatisfied with how the term liberal is being used today. But Ramon, how would you define liberal as you're seeing it here? And I am going to tie it back into the comics as well. Don't worry. But how would you define liberal, Ramon?
I think liberal is to me just somebody who's very much more open, much more tolerant, much more I guess tolerant is probably the key word there. I think liberals, and I'm talking about I think liberals also have their issues and their problems. There are things I don't like about liberals, right? But definitely I like the fact that as a group we tend to be much more tolerant of other cultures, of other people.
Wait, what don't you like about liberals?
I think the fact that liberals tend to overthink things is why we're not very good as a political party. The To me, Republicans are so confident in their beliefs and in their mission, and I think liberals are so diverse and they're always they're we're I think we're much more we have more doubt in the things we do. We overanalyze things we do. So I think that's what, and liberals are less are more likely to not want to offend people, and I think liberals are less aggressive. So so I think those are the things that
It's
that
it's it's actually very, very funny because from the perspective of people on the right, I don't know, Charlie. I mean, you're not on the left, on the right. You're a Ninja Turtle, so you don't even belong, in the political spectrum. Stardust, I think you're more classically liberal. So maybe
Yeah, I'm
Stardust.
chicken wing,
Yes,
not
exactly.
left wing or right wing. I'm something
Yes, I don't know,
something far worse.
I don't damn fan what your political thing is. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot about that either. If you don't want to
Doesn't seem
answer.
like
I'm anonymous.
Anonymous. Okay, good. So as
Right
far
wing, I understand. Got it.
yes, exactly. The correct term would be NDSAP, right? If I'm spelling that correctly. But anyway, Stardust. Where?
yeah, I would just
Yeah.
center left, liberal. I guess that's what I would say.
Hmm.
I'm not into. There's a lot of liberals nowadays who are using the liberal label but aren't really liberal, and they're like communists or whatever. So
Mhm.
Well,
yeah,
that's kind of what I wanted to find out here, because if we're talking about New York society, if we're talking about especially colleges in New York, I would imagine that a lot of the characteristics that people who are, let's say, more on the right would level at, again, the coastal elites, the colleges, would be the complete opposite of what Ramon said. So, Ramon, you said that liberals are tolerant. What people who are more on the right would say is that liberals are extremely intolerant of people that they perceive to be the enemy, where to them
oh,
it is a very clear friend-enemy
I can see
distinction.
that. I can see that, but it's not liberals who want Christian prayers in schools, right?
Does it go beyond Christian prayers, though, and more as far as certain other political opinions? Like, I don't know, Stardust, you talk with a lot of people, you talk with people who are more conservative. Where would you say what would you say the perception is of people who are more on the right towards people who are more on, liberal, not with the classic in there,
yeah.
not the
So
centrist?
we run into an issue where the far left is really like kneecapping us, and so anything that the far left is saying automatically gets applied to the rest of like liberals, right? And that can be very frustrating and very it can be very hard to kind of like dispel that, I guess.
I don't
Especially
disagree.
yeah, yeah. So we get kneecap by if you're talking about like just like perception of the right versus the left, right? It's always the perception is socialists, blue haired, all of that. When really there's a lot of people who are pretty center and they are not screaming all the time, and they want reasonable things, and I think things that are good for the country and good for like families and things like that, right? They just happen to be liberal. So
I'm
Yeah,
sure you
that's
could
kind of how a
say the
lot
same
of
thing about
politics
conservatives
work.
too.
Oh, wait, hold on. One at a time. Ramon, and then Dan Fan.
And I'm sure you could say the same thing about conservatives. I'm sure there are very reasonable conservatives, and I know them.
yeah,
And there
and
are,
yeah,
and
sure there is, yeah, and
There's a
then
you
you
have
big
get
extreme
people who
difference.
paint it
conservatives
Big difference
too.
between a
yeah,
moderate and then the far right jabronis. Those guys
Yeah.
yeah.
are the whole, like the far left and the far right deserve each other. I want them to get married, go to an island, and
Mwah.
sink the
Well, it's
island.
horseshoe theory, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Hmm.
I'm
But
sorry I interrupted Dan fan.
well, Dan Fan, go for it.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, that's kind of how a lot of politics work. Everyone wants to make the other side out to be like this super evil enemy that you got to fight against. And that's how they push their causes. That's how they push for people to vote for them, is saying, well, we got to defeat the other side. It's us versus them,
Well, the other thing that people who would be more... Oh, hold on, Aydin. I sent you the link to the StreamYard thing in Discord. So just go there and you'll be able to get another... Yeah, Aydin Paladin's coming in soon. I can't wait to hear about what she thinks of this. But anyway, what I'm getting to here is that I think people on the right also perceive there being... And I kind of agree with them here. They perceive there being so much of a focus on how bad the West is, how guilty white people are, that it ends up becoming religious in a way. It ends up being because religion does not play as active of a role. I know that, for example, people from the Philippines, there's a lot of Catholicism. I don't know if Catholicism is still alive and well. I believe it definitely is in the Philippines, but in a way, I think their perspective is when you take religion out of the equation, people are still going to yearn for some kind of a religious experience. And so their religious experience today would be, as far as, people who are white, for example, would be to say how horrible we are, how guilty we are, and just kind of do that dance. And in a way, I think it makes them feel pure. It makes them feel superior by saying that. I don't know. That seems to be the impression that I do kind of agree with as far as how the people on the right talk about people on the left. And I don't know, if Ramon, if that's also been something you've been observing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You see it all over social media.
Well, we are going to have Aydin coming in here right now. I see device is not connected. Aydin, connect. There we go. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hey,
I can.
hello.
Hello, Aydin. It's great. It's a great pleasure to see you once again. How have you been?
I've been good. Thanks. Sorry about the confusion. I was just like, I didn't know what I was supposed to click on. It's great to talk to all of you. Pretty much everybody I know, but have not spoken to. Really nice. Know of. If nothing else. Oh no! Apparently, I've done something weird with.
No.
I'm
No,
sorry,
no.
Streamlabs.
No, everything is good. Everything is fine. So Aydin, I want to, and I don't know, Ramon, how much time you have, but I would love for the two of you to actually have a little bit of a back and forth here. I don't know how much you were able to hear from the conversation that we were having, but to make...
No, I was in a D&D game. It literally just wrapped up like 5 minutes ago. So I'm so sorry.
No problem.
It happens to the best of us, Aydin. It happens to the
Just
best
gets
of
here
us.
and you're like, all right, you two, debate.
Yes, Charlie's favorite. Charlie's also an avid D&D player, right?
Mm-hmm. I am the masked DM sometimes. I've got various videos half finished coming soon.
Okay, so before I continue, I just want to say, well, first of all the people subscribe and also, subscribe and also retweet and all that. If you're in this video, retweet as well. Anyway, I'm not going to say no more. Okay, what I want to get to is this. So the conversation that I was having with Ramon, where I 100% agree with Ramon once again that you are free today a lot more than you've ever been before to make your own stuff, to put it out there, and that's all good. My concern goes back to what are most people, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and other, afterwards, going to be influenced when it comes to the dominant culture. And I see comics as being a part of that, and we could say that corporate comics lean in a certain direction. But I wonder how much responsibility there is as far as people who are within that corporate zone, as well as people who are within the more graphic novel zone, including the publishers, as far as the kind of content they're putting out there. Is it somehow organized? Is it something that's just, like I said, I think the likeliest thing is that people don't want to offend people whose community they're in. So if you're living in New York City and you're engaged in a certain artistic profession, there's going to be certain themes that you're going to be more attracted to than others just because you don't want to be the rotten egg. That's my perspective. I am not in the comics industry. So, Aydin, I don't know, you have been following this for quite a while. Mm-hmm. I would love for you to expand a little bit on what I was talking about here.
Well, I don't know. It's nice to meet you, Ramon. But I don't know if you had something to say first on this. My personal opinion on comic books is that sequential art is, if we look at the history of all of humanity, sequential art is are one of our like most basic forms of art. You're never going to stop people from making sequential art. It's how we tell stories. Hieroglyphics are in their own way kind of a form of sequential art, which comic books are as well. So people are always going to make sequential art. The tides and turns of politics will change what kind of sequential art is made, but it's going to be made nonetheless. It seems endemic to the human experience to want to express ourselves in a way that is making art that tells a story in a sequential narrative manner. So I don't know, for Gen Z, will they be more or less stifled by it? I really don't know. I truly do hope though that what we're seeing right now in terms of the post Comicsgate kind of stuff of people having the ability to make their own comics out of their own house. They don't have to work for Marvel or DC or even Image. They can make them in their own home, and then they can produce this for a large number of people. I think that's awesome, and I hope that's what we see as it. And I think that what you get out of that ultimately is more creativity, more individuality, and more good stories.
By the way, Ramon, do you know what Comicsgate is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'm glad we're on the same page here. What is your opinion, by the way, of Comicsgate?
I think they're entitled to their own opinion. What I don't like is when they harass creators.
So, Aydin, I'm not as familiar with what exactly went down with Comicsgate. What was the harassment here?
So, okay, it depends on who you ask about this question, right? Because the Comicsgate people with good rationale would say that they were the ones who were harassed. And the people who are anti-Comicsgate would say that they're the ones who were harassed, which is the problem with perspective, right? Is that different people have different perspectives on things. They can actually both be true at the same time. And I think they probably are both true at the same time because the nature of social media is such that everyone's harassing everybody else to a certain degree. You know what I mean? So,
I feel harassed right now.
Yes. So, and Charles, you actually probably would also know a lot about Comicsgate to give a better maybe overview on it. But the TLDR of it was that really Marvel and DC were releasing these characters and doing these plots that people felt did not represent the desires and wishes of the fandom. And I don't just mean that because the characters were more diverse or because they were, people of color, or because they were more female or something. It was that because they were seemingly intentionally insulting comic book readers. And I know this because this started in about 2008 was when this started, or the first kind of inklings of it, of feeling that the people who were comic fans were essentially being dumped on and disrespected, which is a really dumb thing to do as a company in a capitalist system. But I guess Marvel had just been bought by Disney, so they felt invulnerable. The reality is that since that kind of stuff happened, whatever you think of it, if you like it or not, the social justice sort of involvement into comic books, the result has been a major and serious consistent decrease in sales. Now, it doesn't matter as much because DC's owned by Warner and Marvel's owned by Disney, so that it doesn't really, it cannot be the dark age of comics post, in the 1990s where there are tri-cut, covers of trying to sell 15 different covers to try and make it for the fact that no one wants to buy the freaking comic book itself. We're just doing this attempt at collectors in the eBay generation. So really, the comic book sales have been floundering for years. I think, it's not a question. It's a reality. We know that that's been happening. And comic book sales have been floundering because even if they are appealing to an audience, they're not appealing to the audience that buys comic books. And the people who buy comic books, by and large, we have to be pretty clear, it's young men. By and large, it's young men. And even when they made these comics for women, that were more directed or aimed at women, allegedly, didn't really matter. Women aren't going out to a comic to the LCS. They just aren't, and they never have, and they probably won't ever. I don't know why, but they don't seem to be doing that in large numbers enough to be able to float the industry. So the industry has been failing for about 10 years, pretty seriously. And adding in more and more diverse characters, more female characters as main stars to replace the white males or the black males sometimes, by the way, in some of these cases, is not helping the industry. I understand why people want to see themselves in comic books, but let's be real, there's also the entire massive industry of independent comic books that allows you to tell stories that would appeal to, let's say, more marginalized groups. Image Comics has served that for a long time. I mean, and it's not just that not just Image. You have been able to find this diversity within the big two for a long time. It's just that it seemed to be an outcry that didn't go anywhere and wasn't going to actually be taken seriously by the big two comic publishers in any way outside of pandering. Does that make sense? Sorry.
Well, I'll ask Ramon. Ramon, does that make sense? Or I mean, you already know about a lot of this stuff, so I'm just curious if you have any questions or pushback to what Aydin was talking about.
I think she was spot on, but my perspective is I don't give a fuck. It's like they want to do what they want to do, they can do it. I'm making my own comic books. I'm making my comic books. I'm making the comic books that I want to make. I'm putting in diverse characters. I'm writing the stories that I want to write. It's like Marvel, DC. Whether I do agree that they are changing characters for the sake of diversity, as it's been mentioned before, diversity for diversity's sake. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I think it definitely could be done better. But do I care? I don't care.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for independent creators to take their thing and go.
Also, let me something that Lev also brought up earlier. You're concerned about that these movements are influencing youth today, right? I can guarantee you a very small percentage of the population is reading comics.
Don't worry, he's going to be back. It's a weird camera setting on this part.
If a small percentage of people are reading the comics...
Well, smaller now than even 10 years ago. Let's be real.
I'm wondering, what's now that these the movies and TV shows are starting to pick up from a lot of these storylines. I'm curious how people are receiving that.
What I can tell you about that,
what their ratings are, if there's going to be pushback. Like I know they did the Lady Thor, they did Miss Marvel. I'm curious to see what they do with She-Hulk.
To be fair, Valkyrie and Miss Marvel have been around for decades. They are not new characters in any way. What I would say, though, is that we've actually been doing, Marvel, of course, and DC have been doing studies on this since they started making their major motion pictures, which is that the uptick in sales of comic revenue after a release of a major film is almost imperceivable. People do not go to a comic store to buy a Batman comic after a Batman movie is released.
Well, why would they? They have the movie. They don't need the comic.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder what toy sales are now. Are toys like? Do kids even want toys in a world full of video games and iPads? Does a kid want the action figures now? Those Marvel Legends toys are so much better than the dumpy Toy Biz things I had as a kid, where you could push a button and slide. Wolverine had a thing on his chest that would slide over, and it had like a little claw mark where he'd been slashed by something.
Well, those are probably like the adult toys now, sometimes literally, but...
those are action figures for
I was going to say, what do you mean by this? What kind of Wolverine adult toy?
Question. I think Ramon was on to something when he was saying, if you think that there's children are being influenced today by media, right? Is it not also accurate to say that children were being impacted and influenced by media very negatively in the past, right? I mean, that study that they've recreated that study several times since then. I mean, I think when you're not, I think, when somebody grows up and they see things that affect their self-esteem, I think, and again, I'm not advocating for diversity based on diversity's sake. Obviously, I think that if there's a good storyline there, they should go with a good storyline and not just do it for diversity's sake.
100%.
I agree. The cream's going to rise to the crop.
But I do think that, that seeing more diversity in these things isn't necessarily a bad thing. So
no, it's not. What's weird about that, though, and just real quick, is that's how I grew up in the 90s. Was Marvel and DC were both full of diverse characters, and you didn't have to be. The plot of the comic wasn't based around necessarily how diverse the character was. It was based on their personality. I came to know those characters as people and know them as human beings rather than, well, they tick XYZ boxes. And that's the problem. Is that you can I mean, I don't know if it's obvious from the shirt that my avatar is wearing, but Daredevil is my favorite character in media in general.
Yeah, I don't know, Ramon. Can you see Aiden's shirt over there?
It's it's a reference to the Mark Waid I'm Not Daredevil reference from 2008, 2010, like that. When Daredevil wore he got ousted. He was publicly everyone knew that he was Matt Murdock, and now is Matt Murdock a particularly diverse character for calculating stuff the way, I don't know if you've seen Blizzard has a calculator of how diverse a character is, and they'll put him on a little sheet and you can do it all mathematically. I find that to be,
I mean, Daredevil
frankly offensive. But
they basically do it on committee at this point.
Yeah,
it's like a disabled person, right? Because he's blind.
He is blind. Know. I mean, he can technically see better than everybody because he's got radar vision. But yeah,
I don't see a lot of blind kids wanting to read comic books at Daredevil. Maybe they want to hear a story, but
I don't think a lot of blind kids can read Daredevil, to be fair. But unfortunately,
somebody could read it to them, I guess. But I don't
kind of diversity for diversity's sake, guys. I mean, geez.
Was there ever like a Braille comic? I want to take a look at this now.
There's got to be, but I mean, like, when I was like Captain Marvel, when I got really into comics, would have been what's her name? She was in the film. Quasar.
Mary Marvel.
Not Quasar.
Monica Rambeau.
Monica Rambeau. Which is, and nobody cared. I mean, when I was a really little kid, my favorite comic book character was Storm, as a little white girl growing up in West Virginia. Like,
hell yeah, Storm was awesome.
Exactly.
Everybody loved Storm. The X-Men cartoon
nobody cared
in the 90s was so good about, like, that's how you do diversity, where it's a team of everybody from around the world. And they're each different, and each would approach a problem completely different from the others. Wolverine's idea of how to solve a problem was not the same as the Cajun Gambit or Storm.
Yeah, Wolverine's was snicked. That's how he solves problems.
Make you a convertible.
But getting back to the meat of this thing, which I think is in not just comics, but also how young people are going to be more, I'd say, roboticized by what's coming down the road. Because if you were mentioning right now this diversity chart where a character has to tick these particular things in order to be this particular thing, it almost seems like with artificial intelligence coming down the road, certain things are going to be geared. Forget diversity, forget social justice. I think certain things are going to be geared to gain the maximum amount of attention from whatever it is kids see. Like, I don't know, Ramon, when your kids were growing up, I don't know if you had like iPads there, but the kids that I saw that were growing up with the iPads, when they go on YouTube and they click on all those finger family videos, all those videos with the super bright backgrounds and these stupid, you've heard of Elsa Gate probably, Ramon, right? Do you know Elsa Gate?
Elsa Gate was crazy. It was a YouTube series of videos where I think they were some kind of foreigners. They were like somewhere in Eastern Europe, right?
It doesn't matter where they were from. The reality is that I don't mean to interrupt you, Charles. Sorry. But
they dressed up as different characters like Elsa and Spider-Man, and they were doing really weird, like Elsa pregnant videos, and like Spider-Man would chase her around the house. It was very bizarre. It felt... it was a very strange thing.
Well, they were meant to tick every algorithm bot that might promote it to children. Spider-Man, Elsa, finger friend, finger painting fun time, and there's all kinds of weird,
for some reason,
creepy
pregnancy.
Yeah, I don't understand.
And needles, needles were.
Yeah, there was a lot of needles too. I remember that one. Oh God.
And feet. It was really weird. The whole thing was very bizarre.
Now, even if you could say canceled Elsagate, what is still going on are these videos for kids, even though they don't have any comments in there. They're like super bright colored. They have all these primary colors. So it's like candy. You get attracted to something that is so bright when you're, like 4 years old, 3 years old. And the question to me is, and this I think does have something to do with comics as well, are we headed towards the lowest common denominator being instantly stimulated by whatever entertainment we're going to see, whether it's comics on the internet, whether it's online
I mean, you
videos?
look at the AI art, like what's to stop? Where does it go from there? What's to stop somebody from making sequential art and then putting it together for a story? I'm sure somebody somewhere has already done that with these AI art things.
Yeah,
But it's going
you're
to get
right.
to a point where, like you were saying, it's going to hijack into your brain and know exactly what's going to peak, what's going to get people clicking, what's going to get people's eyes, what's going to get people interested. And it's going to get real weird. You're going to get a lot of like pregnancy feet, weird needles and teeth.
The
Just
teeth
very
thing, yeah.
strange.
It's
Very strange content.
You got to also know that these devices listen to you constantly. I was talking to people in private yesterday about a ride that I liked in a theme park that I went to as a child. And then today I show up on YouTube and it's all I see is, would you like to know
Oh,
more of
no.
the history of this ride?
Scary stuff.
I know.
But Ramon, the reason why I bring this up as well is, and yeah, you know what? I'm not going to pretend this isn't so much about comics anymore, but it is something that I'm very fascinated by. Because if we were talking about comics, what are comics at the end of the day? Comics are representations of images that people look at and get inspired by.
Comics are culture.
Yeah, comics are culture, exactly. So as far as the culture, whether it's drawn, animated, whether it's on your television, whether it's in the movie theater, you're getting something out of that I think, if it's good, it's going to resonate with a very deep part of you. It's going to connect to certain mythologies, certain experiences maybe that your ancestors have had. And it's something that's going to give a lasting impression and give you a reason to keep on living, if I can be so dramatic in saying this. Like the most powerful of movies, I think, do that to people.
Absolutely, it does.
But then when you have that same power to impact people like that wielded on kids who are super young through all these various eye devices, you could say that, okay, part of it could just be getting the lowest common denominator, click, click, click. But how much is there a potential for this? And this is more of the tinfoil hatted Lev time. How much more is there a potential for this to be used and abused by people who want to, do a little bit of social engineering, get people to be a certain way? So I don't know, Aydin, how much tinfoil hatted can we get here?
The general effect of in the total, if I were to truncate down my entire field of media psychology and look at media effects, even on children, it's quite low, actually. The thing is that it's very low. It barely reaches statistical significance. The thing is that media effects have to be reinforced by a broader society, and particularly in children, by familial reinforcement, right? Just watch. This is the thing. Like, it's the same thing that a lot of us here who are a bit older dealt with during the Satanic Panic, or the multiple Satanic Panics, right? That, if you watch a movie where something there's something bad that happens in it or something,
If you
then
play
kids will be-
Dungeons and Dragons, you're into the occult.
Right, as I just got done playing
Ooh.
D&D, right? So no, that's actually not what happens. Children are actually quite resilient to a lot of this stuff, but it has to be in an environment that is healthy for them outside of the media, where that parents can talk to their children about the media. And I highly recommend, if anyone has never read Understanding Comics, The Invisible Art by Scott McCloud, highly suggest that book. It is, I think, required reading if you want to understand how comics work as a medium of sequential art. I would highly suggest that. Do I think that because woke comics, first of all, if you look at the demographics of who buys comic books, it's like 20 plus. It's not kids. Kids don't buy comics anymore. And part of the main reason for that I've spoken about at length in my personal stuff is that used to be, back in the day, you could buy comic books at a grocery store. Now you have to go to an LCS to do that.
That's so sad. Like, I remember being a little
I know.
kid. My first comic book, I even bought it myself. It was The Amazing Spider-Ham. And it had on the cover, you had the Incredible Hulk Bunny.
Yeah.
You had Captain America. I love that comic book. It was so good. And then the next week, I went and bought The Demon, because I was that little kid who loved monsters. And the shock of my parents like picking that up and going, "Oh, what have you got here? Oh my God!" Like, they had no idea. Like, how crazy, like the demon in let's say 1989, 1990, fairly crazy comic book for a little kid to be picking up off the shelf and reading. But I loved it. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, like all these crazy monsters and energy blasts. And being able to just pick that up off the shelf at, the video rental place, like that was so cool. I love that. And that's an experience that like kids aren't going to be able to walk through a video rental store. They're not going to be able to physically pick up a thing and look on the back, the cover and try to find out what this movie is.
There is no physical anymore, Charlie. We're all going to get into the pods, and we're all
no,
going to put on our
Don't put me in the pod. I want to own stuff.
Real quick, I know.
No.
I think I don't know what time it is there, but I think did you say you had to leave soon?
Wait, Ramon, you're muted.
Sorry.
Oh, at 8. I'm sorry, who's talking? Is that
Oh,
Aydin?
me.
Aydin.
Hello. I don't know what time it is in the U.S., so I just want to make sure.
I actually have to get going myself.
So
I'll
it's
see you guys
7
later.
All right,
Oh, wow.
Thank you
Stardust.
so much for having me.
Thank you so much
Nice
for
to meet
coming
you.
in, as always. Great to see you,
ya.
Stardust. Bye-bye. So Ramon, since you have to go at 8, I want to make sure that the two of you guys, before we conclude, have a little bit of a chance to talk. And I think we are almost on the same page over here as far as how we see things going. I don't really think that there is much of an issue with, like Ramon said, starting your own independent business that's going to get exactly the kind of people that you want to get in it. Again, the only thing that's really clashing for me here is issues having to do with what exactly is going to happen with the minds of younger kids. And
Can I-
Aydin, yes.
I like what Aydin said about how these things, the impact on young people are very small. It has to be reinforced by familial influence, I guess. And a few years ago, I discovered a bunch of not quite erotic, but pretty close to erotic manga on the Kindle, right?
Oh my.
A whole bunch of manga, right? So I sat down with my son, and he must have been 12 at the time, and I said, so I saw all these manga titles on here with a lot of with this steamy stuff, and he goes, yes, Dad. And I said, I just want you to, I hope you realize that in real life, women don't want to be treated this way. And he goes, yes, Dad, I know. So, and I left it at that, and he's a great kid, he's very respectful. He's very, very supportive of his sister. Him and his sister get along great. I know he has female friends, and he's very helpful. He's a great kid. And so whether or not that little talk was enough, or he knew from beforehand that women don't want to be treated the way they get treated in these manga comic books, where their skirts are always getting blown up so you can see their panties.
Yeah,
right? So,
I wish there was more talk about people talking to their kids about that sort of stuff. Like, as a kid, I was exposed to stuff like Conan the Barbarian. And Conan is, at one point he's making love to a witch woman and throws her into a fire. So that's not necessarily, something that little kids should be watching. But, if you're like 12, 13, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. If you have that parent to say, listen, man, like, you can't make love to witch women and just throw them into a fireplace when they give you the information you need. That's not cool. Or Go-Go 13, who always has the same expression.
Charles,
every time
Charles, I can tell you're not married.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah, but the to be the parent, like, that's to have those conversations with kids, to be in that role, because it doesn't have to just be the parent. It could be, the line from that Guardians of the Galaxy. He might have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy. To have that voice of reason in your ear to say, listen, this is a cartoon, this is a comic book, real life and cartoons are very different, pal. Like, this is.
I think.
Yeah, like,
I think we should worry about media influence if we accept the idea of giving up all control, all upbringing of our children to the media.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
That's
Like,
the
if
problem.
you tell me a kid's reading like hardcore, like the really weird Japanese stuff, I'm like, I don't know about this, son. But if he's looking at Go-Go 13 or like those Conan, the Savage Sword of Conans would go pretty hard. like that kind of stuff.
You don't want them to go full Kurt Eichenwald. Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, don't
Yes,
go full
avoid the
Eichenwald.
tentacles. Avoid
The-
the tentacles.
The important that is the exact problem is that there are and I mean my mom is a preschool teacher, right? And so she gets to well during the pandemic in particular when the school was closed, she went and did babysitting for a lot of these people's kids and saw what the kids did in their own home. And again, these are preschoolers, so they're 3 or 4. And what they do at home for she said almost always was they just sit there with a tablet and they just scroll and they click and they watch and they have no physical connection to things. And at that
That's
point,
sad.
you know,
Like
I know it's sad, but it's also like the parent really can't curate any of the things or even talk to their kid about the stuff they've seen if they've been exposed to 10 billion different
yeah, like how does
media
a parent
pieces a
even
day.
be aware of what the kid's even watching on YouTube because it's such a deep blue
Or anywhere.
ocean of content. You know, it's not like when I was a kid, you know, the TV only had so many channels to flip through. And so, you know, when I'm talking about watching RoboCop or Predator, my father knows what I'm talking about. But if I start talking about Jack Skeptic Eye or Vsauce 2, my father's eyes glaze over now. And those are popular guys. Dad has no idea who Leon Lush is. Like, he doesn't know what that is.
It's
Doesn't mean
even
anything.
outside of the fact that not knowing about it. It's the amount of content is so massive and it is right at their fingertips. All of it. Now I know that there are parental guidelines on these iPads
Yeah, those don't-
supposedly,
those
but
things
how
don't
much
do
I don't think they work. I don't know how well they work, but I don't think they work very well. Uh-oh.
Hold on, I think he's going to be back over here because it's not 8 o'clock yet, so I think there may be a technical thing over here. Oh, Ramon, okay, here we go. Yes, Ramon, you are back. I know you got to go soon. I know you have the hard stop, but before you go, I wanted to address one final thing, which is exactly this community aspect that we were talking about here. Well, more family aspect, more people who are within, you know, the people that you trust aspect. But then you have other people, for example, who are in schools that are saying, you know, don't talk to your parents about A, B, or C. You know, keep this a secret from them if we're talking about things having to do with gender identity, things of that nature, where it does seem like there is a wedge that is being driven in certain circumstances, which I think is very illiberal between the kids and their parents. Almost like they want to be, you know, raising people who are very disconnected from anything but whatever it is they're told is the right thing. I don't know, like that is more of the fertile ground, I'd say, where something like the social justice aspect that we may not be big fans of gets a chance to thrive. When parents are involved, you know, especially when they're common sense parents like yourself, it's a different story. So I don't know, Aydin, when it comes to that aspect of it, how much pressure is it there? I know Ramon has a hard stop, so if there's anything you could say like in 2 minutes, and then Ramon, I would love to hear your thoughts about that. Let me know.
Oh, let's let Ramon go first since he's going to head
Okay.
out.
All right, Ramon, let me know what you think.
Aydin, you go first because I'm still trying to figure out the question.
Okay.
About what parents should do, essentially, or what parents
Well,
should allow?
Not about what parents should do or allow, more about what exactly are we facing here when it comes to educational systems that want to tear away the parents from the children as far as where the influence comes from.
Okay, well, that is... Now, I have to be very clear, and this might not rub everyone the right way, but that is a very common tactic within communist systems, because the whole idea is that there should not be any kind of structures within society that exist, such that the parental child foundation and connection is fundamentally, this is the idea, and this is why it's being promoted by a lot of these people, not all of them, but many of them. And you can ask them, they will tell you in their own words that they are communists or they're socialists. And usually they'll say they're communists. Is that the parental child relationship is predatory, or it's discriminatory because it is a power system where the parent has power over the child. So what I think where that's coming from people is that they're trying to give the child all this power, but the reality is that children do not have literally their brains are not developed fully. So they really don't have the full capacities as adults do in terms of making decisions or thinking about things. So you do need the parents' involvement. It appears to be that way to replace the parent is with the state. That's not a good idea. You still have a power system there, by the way. You still have someone in power who's telling a child what to do or what to think. So I don't think that what's happening right now is helpful or beneficial to children, and in that involves comics as well in its own way. Children are going to explore on their own. They're going to learn. They're going to have to learn socially via their involvement with their peers, and that is normal and healthy to do. The over involvement either of parent or the state, the over involvement to the point where the child can't explore is a problem, I would say.
Ramon, any parting thoughts on that?
I agree. I think that, but I think in the bottom line is that every parent has to stand up for what they believe in and how they want their kids to be raised. So for me, I would never want my children to be in that situation, or I don't have any role in their education, right? So yeah. So I think I don't know what you're talking about, but from what I gather, I don't like it.
All right, Ramon, the reason why I'm bringing it up, just like in the final minute here that we are in, is because I want to make sure that the schools that the young people are going to, like in New York City, I'm very suspicious that a lot of this stuff is going on behind your back in these institutions. And I want to make sure that awareness is brought to that.
Okay. So, yeah. My parting thought really for everything we've talked about is that we can talk about it or we can do something about it. So what are we going to do about it? I'm doing stuff about it. We should all be doing something about it rather than just talking about it.
Definitely. I completely
Guys,
agree.
It's been a pleasure.
Ramon.
It was great seeing you again.
Nice to meet you.
Great to see you too.
It's a pleasure meeting everybody. Please connect with me on Facebook. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing and converse more.
Where else can we find you? And what are you working on right now that we should be aware of?
I'm going to be launching a comic called The Whiz Kids from DARPA, which is a diverse set of kids who are geniuses who work for the government, and it's going
to... No!
Careful timing.
Right in the
end. Lost him.
Whiz
Yeah,
Kids
just
from
put
DARPA.
his links in the chat.
Yes. So listen,
guys, the comic web comic is still not out, but I will put in the link for the school, for the online course.
Whiz Kids from DARPA. I wonder if they're going to write any of those robot dogs. You know, the big dogs? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the Boston Dynamics one, yeah.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot of craziness going on there.
Thanks. I'm always looking for ideas for the comic, and that's a great idea right there. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That one's for free.
Guys.
All right, Ramon. Thank you very much for coming in. All right. Take care.
Take care.
So, listen, guys, if you have been enjoying the show, be sure to give a subscription. BreakTheRules.tv is where you go. Very much appreciated. And if you want to further help out the show, Patreon.com/BreakTheRules. Become a patron today. We are going to appreciate the heaven out of that. So, listen, this is very important that we got somebody like the Ramon to come in here. He's in New York City. He's in FIT, big university. And I think that he has a very good balanced perspective on a lot of these things that were talked about here. But what vibe do you guys get necessarily of what is necessarily? That doesn't even fit into the sentence. Listen, a spider bit me today probably, so I was having chills. In the beginning, they're gone now.
You might get superpowers.
Yeah, you're going to turn into Spider-Man.
Exactly. It's very thematic. But listen, the important thing here is that my consciousness is still here. I'm still able to function like a human being, I think. So anyway, without further ado, I'm trying to get the thoughts in my head out there, which is basically, yes, comics is something interesting, diversity, social justice in comics. We've been down that road already. I want to take a look at the future now. I want to take a look at how exactly human beings, starting with the young generations, are going to start functioning right now. Whether we're going to be lost in this bunch of noise, whether we're just going to be stimulated in our pods, or what exactly is awaiting us here. So I don't know, Aydin, you look very deeply at the way that human minds work. Any predictions? Anything you see down the line?
Well, I don't know, but I am always reminded, or not always, but often reminded of an Isaac Asimov quote, which is that, and he's talking about science fiction here, but I would expand it to apply to comic books as well, because comic books are expressions of human creativity. Isaac Asimov said, individual science fiction, but let's say comic book stories, may seem as trivial as ever to the blinded critics and philosophers of today, but the core of comic books is, in essence, has become crucial to our salvation if we are to be saved at all. And I do actually think that's kind of true. Our ability to tell stories is so innate to human evolution. We developed this around the campfire, we developed this capacity to tell stories. And sequential art is just one way that we tell stories. It's one of the oldest ways that we tell stories. It's cave art, That's how you tell a story. And it's very important to convey cultural meaning. Comic books, as trivial as they may seem, as Isaac Asimov wrote there about the science fiction story, as trivially as it may seem, is a conveyor of cultural meaning. So I do think comic books are very important. And that's why I don't want to see them be destroyed or fail. We could look at Superman as kind of the exemplar of this, right? Simon and Schuster, who... correct? Simon and Schuster is a different group of people. Different group of people. God damn.
Those two different fellas.
Yeah, my brain's messed up. The two guys who created Superman, right, were two men who escaped from the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And why, when you read why they described it, what Superman was he a golem? Yes, they do say that they took some of the idea from him from Jewish literature and lore, and part of it was as a protective figure. But I think that applies to the entirety of humanity, not just the Jewish people. And I think that's what they meant by him as well. It was not just to protect the Jewish people, but to protect everybody. To look at this figure who represents truth, justice, and the American way. And to look up to that figure. And that in the same way that a golem works, right? I'm talking about in Talmudic mythology. That the idea of a golem protects the community. Now, in that case, it would be an actual golem protecting the community in terms of the historical legacy. But the idea of Superman as being protective of truth, justice, and the American way should be in the same way protective of those ideas. And both emblematic and protective of them. I think that's super important, and it's exemplary of the importance of comic books, of showing how you can take a picture on a piece of paper and make it iconography.
That's very beautifully said.
I don't know about that, but close enough, I guess.
Well, Damfan, do you agree with the Superman golem analogy? What do you think?
I have no idea about that. I mean, most of my knowledge comes from a lot of the modern comics, and even then, it's like I'm more of a manga reader than anything else.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, comics, even if they die, manga's still alive.
Manga has lit up comic books in America. Like, they've eaten their lunch. I mean, they've eaten their dinner at this point.
Well,
like,
you know why?
Because
it's good.
Yeah. The cream rises to the top.
So it doesn't even matter at the end of the day whether... I love Randy. Whether there is or isn't going to be American comics anymore, because the Japanese are still doing it, the French are still doing it.
Yeah.
So it's French not really. Comics. I don't think it's going to die out. But again, I keep using the word concern. Deeply concerned. I don't think I'm as concerned about a lot of fuck it. Life is going to go the way it goes. We don't know exactly how people are going to react to the technological changes.
I think Ramon was really onto something, like saying, go out and make your own stuff.
Definitely.
Build your own roads. Like, that's the perfect thing to try to do, is to do your own thing and see. Because, like I said, the Ninja Turtles were made by two guys. There's two dudes just sitting in their living room drawing stuff. And look at what that was. Look at Image Comics. Like, all those artists got together and went and did their own thing. And look at all the success they've had. it's possible. Like you can't. Star Wars only exists because George Lucas could not get the rights to Flash Gordon.
Yes,
Went and made his own damn Flash Gordon.
And to quote Kendrick Lamar, build your own pyramids, write your own hieroglyphs. It's incredibly daunting when you put it that way, but everything is daunting, and that's the kind of the beauty of the Comicsgate movement of being like, you know what, you don't like us, you don't want us, Marvel and DC, or even Image, fine, we'll make our own comic books
with
That's what
hookers
America's
and
all
blackjack.
Wait, why was Doug TenNapel complaining about Comicsgate?
I don't really understand what Doug's up about.
That kind of
all
stuff,
the, I don't. I'm not. I have to be very clear. I am not at all aware what's going on within the Comicsgate part with Doug TenNapel, but I do know that he's kind of burned, as far as I can tell, like his bridge with everybody else in Comicsgate. I don't know why. He just has. I don't know anything about him. I just know that he's burning bridges, and not a good idea when you're talking about trying to build a community based.
Yeah, it is about people being able to not just build your own thing, which I think is very important, but also being able to have some kind of I may sound a bit like a commie for saying it, but some kind of solidarity, having some kind of solidarity with people that even if you disagree with them politically, even if you disagree with them culturally, if there is something where you can unite together against a bigger force and support each other, I think that could be a good thing. I mean,
the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
I mean, my problem that I'm seeing right now is more that there are certain people that are supporting causes that I really, really don't like. And I'm sure, Aydin, you've been in this boat too, where people around you, even if you agree with them on one thing, they're going to be all the way on the other side when it comes to this other thing that's extremely important to you, and all of a sudden it's like, it's difficult because it is the kind of stuff. I mean, maybe that's where TenNapel's coming from, that it ends up tearing people apart. I mean, I do want to do a stream later on with you, Aydin, about Russia. I think that will be a very interesting one.
Oh, right, that would be probably interesting.
Because to me, we would probably disagree, but to me, that was always a very big thing because the way that I look at it, and again, I'm not going to do the Russia stream right now, just so we're not talking.
No, I know, but you're from Eastern Europe, yeah?
Yeah, I'm from St. Petersburg. I was born I was born in Russia, and I have a lot of people who are still there and people who were very involved with the things that went down after Perestroika during the early 90s, during the bad old days. So these are people who personally knew Putin. They knew what exactly was going on there. And I don't
think you can blame Putin for Perestroika.
And so, no, but the perspective that I have just with the people who I know is very different from people who I notice in more of the online dissident communities where they see NATO as being the bigger threat. They see it as being, and I know you did a whole video where you were talking about certain justifications, and we can go into that later on.
Yeah, it's a whole different.
Yeah, but my point is a little bit bigger though. My point is that the way that I look at it, it's kind of like you have you're like Winston Churchill in World War II, and maybe we'll disagree about that too. Who knows? But you're like Winston Churchill in World War II, and you know that Hitler's going to start taking over more shit. Yeah, and you're starting to convince people of it, and nobody's listening. Why? Because nobody.
MacArthur in the Korean War.
Yeah, not in
nuke
favor.
Everybody, nuke them all.
I'm more in favor of MacArthur, not in that part, not in terms of the glass, not in terms of the blasting everybody, and I'm also not in favor of a lot of what Churchill said, but that's for a totally different time. What I would say though, and what I've found to be very helpful for me, and maybe it's in part because I found Christ and stuff like that. I'm not going to say that's why, but I do think that you got to listen to people. Like, even people you disagree with, and you're going to disagree with, but you got to listen to them. Do you know what I mean? And I didn't do that for a whole lot of my time on YouTube. I didn't listen to people I disagree with. I just went like, fucking lefty idiot. But that's not helpful, actually.
I think that shows
creates
growth.
further division.
There's,
I would hope so.
There's something to talking to people that have completely different ideologies than you.
Yeah,
there was something beautiful about the Monty Python guys. There was it was John Cleese was talking about Oh man, the one that directs the movies and did the cartoons. He said he loved
Terry
him.
Gilliam.
Yeah, loved Terry Gilliam dearly, but anytime they talked about politics or religion, he wanted to fist fight them.
Yeah, yeah.
So but he said that this man was my brother and I love him dearly, and but we never saw eye to eye about that sort of thing, but we're still pals. And I think there's something beautiful about that. That's what I love about Break the Rules, is you get thrown on with people and you don't know if you're gonna be at each other's throats and be friendly with one another the next minute.
I think what I would preach, if I could preach anything, is that everybody's got to calm the fuck down. Okay? Like just like, I know wherever you're at, calm it down by like 50%, wherever you're at. just in general, do it wherever you're at.
I keep telling people to laugh more. Like, enjoy
laugh.
life. Find what gives you joy. Find things to laugh about. Find things that'll make you feel, enriched by it, like conversation with people. There's something to the interaction with other people. Like, human beings are social creatures, and not having that, isolating yourself and being, walled off from everybody. Like you said, it's the ostrich thing, where it's I stick my head in the sand, and if I don't see it, it doesn't exist. You can't do that because this stuff exists. Like, the Comicsgate guys are going off doing their things. The Marvel comics, the social justice-y stuff, like, they're doing their thing. And both can exist and both could thrive. Given a good enough story will get people interested.
People gotta talk, because the whole reason that I think a lot of the Comicsgate stuff happened, and not just Comicsgate, but all over this sector, right? It's because nobody talks to each other. There is no capacity, and I do feel bad because like I've seen people like let's be real, I've seen people like Sargon who have tried to talk to people like Christy Winters and actually brought them in. Christy Winters was a really hardcore feminist, brought her in to talk, and she really didn't have any desire to do it. You can't help that, okay? You can't fix that. If the people aren't interested in talking or engaging, there's nothing you can do. But you can try at least, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, something that's not been tried as much, except for Break the Rules, except for what happened today, was bringing in people who are from completely different fields. Like Aydin, you may have different disagreements, debates with people on the internet. And for the most part, they're going to be people who are used to this kind of culture, right? They're going to be people who are used to this kind of back and forth. But people who come from more of an environment such as Ramon, for example, other people in New York City, where they have their career, they have their social network of people that they grew up with, and they're like nice, regular people, but there are certain things that they may not be privy to, like especially towards the end when we were talking about like what may be going on in the schools as far as like this division, between the kids and the family. And again, I don't know the schools that all my friends have their kids at, but I did hear bad stories. For example, we had a guest on Break the Rules who taught at a very prestigious New York City school where they really wanted to promote critical race theory, and he stood up against that, and he was fired because of that. So I imagine that this is something. But of course, remember,
critical race theory doesn't even exist. It's fake. It's a made-up thing, unless you oppose it, in which case you can lose your job. Yeah, I mean, like that kind of stuff is absurdist. But it's because exactly what you were saying, though. I think we had a productive conversation, even though I don't think Ramon and I would probably agree on anything political. But I think we could agree on comics. You know what I mean?
Yes. But it's more about the awareness, because if this is something that is happening that people just don't fucking know about, like I could easily imagine there being a lot of people who bring their kids to school and who, have their kids come back from school, and everybody's just vibing at their own, level of vibration. I don't think this is something that a lot of parents are even aware of. I mean, it wasn't recent that parents started standing up against a lot of this stuff. More, less in New York City, more in the Trump-supporting states. They started having these protests, and then the FBI started going against the parents, labeling them terrorists, something like that.
Well, I know, unbelievable, crazy stuff. Well, again, because what they were teaching the kids in these states was, we're telling your children specifically to not talk to you about problems that they're having.
Cool. You can't tell kids that.
Do you,
That-
and
that's
do you think
ridiculous.
that? Do you think that's why, by the way, that a lot of these parents are clueless?
Maybe. I mean, considering the
Probably.
schools are. Sorry, Dan Fan, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead. I'm the one who
Oh,
interrupted
Dan
you.
Fan, you're so nice. Are you
No,
Canadian?
Dan Fan. You haven't talked in forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a brief story. Part of the reason why I do the DCYA read-throughs is so that people know what's in the book. Because a lot of parents buy them for their kids without knowing what exactly is in there or what morals are being taught. And I've had instances where parents like go up to my table when I'm selling comics and they tell me about how like a librarian or a teacher suggested a book for their kid. One of them was like 8 years old, and she just assumes that like the librarian knew what to suggest to the kid, but apparently the book had a lot of not so good for kids stuff in it, including like sex scenes and stuff like that. And I feel like, that happens to a lot of parents where they don't know. They assume that everything's fine. They assume that like the people suggesting these books or the people selling these books were doing it because they have like the right intentions. Maybe they do. I don't know. But that's definitely a big mistake to make when you're giving an 8-year-old a book that has like cursing and sex scenes in it. But yeah, so part of the reason why I do the DCYA read-throughs is to show people what's actually in the book, react, and give my own opinion on whether or not they're like good morals or whether or not it's a good book to actually suggest to people. The recent read-through that I did was Under the Moon, and that had some pretty not so great stuff for kids to be reading, glorifying self-harm, glorifying homelessness, glorifying joining a
Glorifying
cult. It was
homelessness?
really crazy.
Oh my god.
What? No, how do you glorify homelessness? Like, hey kids, here's the virtues of being a bum.
No, it did though. It was
Oh my
like,
God.
Selena's so brave, being independent and refusing everyone's help.
Yeah, just being a moron, living out on the streets, not able to wipe your own ass, shitting in the street. Like, what is that?
As I said earlier, though, now 60 years of media psychology research shows that the influence of media on behavior is basically nominal. It doesn't do a whole lot. But that's individual influence of media. What we don't have a good idea of, even after 60 years of research, is the idea of chronic exposure to media, right? So we don't
Terminally online, folks. How cursed are they?
We've got some new research on the terminally online people, and I'll tell you what the research on the terminally online people is. They are depressed. They have extremely low self-esteem. They are constantly preoccupied with checking social media and with checking their phones. That stuff's not healthy.
What about cooming? Are they coomers?
I haven't looked at that research. I'm sure it exists. I guarantee if I.
What do
I
they
looked
think
at
about memes? Are they meme people?
meme or mean?
I said meme.
Well, I
As
don't
in
know about
meme
that.
bastards.
Well, I don't know about either one, but I would tell you that if you're addicted to something, we all kind of know. Well, maybe not we all know, but we kind of know what addicts are like. And if addicts can't get what they want, addicts can become very, very mean. Addicts can become very aggressive. And so if we're talking about removing social media, and we do know, by the way, that social media is addictive, okay? This is very thoroughly studied research. Social media is addictive, particularly things like TikTok. I had downloaded TikTok about 2 months ago just to look at it, right?
Oh no!
Oh no, Aydin, what did you do? You
Well,
opened Pandora's box.
I know I did. And so what I do is that before I go to sleep at night, I will sit there and I'll browse through some TikToks. And what TikTok is really good at figuring out what you want to watch. Its algorithm is extremely good. So what it knows that I want to watch is that I want to watch people making things like creative stuff, home renovations, and pimple popping. And that's what it's figured out. And every time I look at those, I go like, "Ow!"
Wait,
yeah.
Aydin,
But I still
Aydin,
wanna
if you're,
see it. I still
if
gotta see it. I gotta see what happens, you know.
Aydin, why?
Aydin, if you're into the pimple
have to.
popping, I highly recommend you look up the videos where they
I'm not really
remove
into it.
remove the skin from, not the skin, where they clean the cow hooves. You know, when they remove like there's some piece of metal that's stuck inside the
It's
cow's hoof.
satisfying.
Oh,
Yeah,
you know?
it's satisfying kind of stuff. It's
Oh, I
the same,
hate
like,
that. It's just repulsed. The algorithm will occasionally put one of those up, and I can't hit dislike and block and just get away from that kind of stuff.
But it-
fast
but it-
enough.
but it-
if you're on
oh,
TikTok,
But
just
it's so
scroll through
it's
real
so
quick.
satisfying.
Like,
When they takes the knife, when he
slime.
takes the knife and he like
Yeah,
slowly
I like
starts. Yeah, he slowly starts
those.
to work on the cow shoe. What do you call it? Like the hoof, and all of a sudden he gets to a certain level and blood just starts spurting out.
No, I don't want to see that. No, that's horrible.
Yeah.
That's horrible. No, I don't like that.
No, but that's such a relief for the cow because the cow's been
Is it?
walking because the cow's been walking all this time with some piece of metal stuck in this area. So as soon as the blood comes out, that's like the
Oh,
pressure's been building up.
Oh my god,
Man, I
it's so
can feel
gross.
my stomach
I
turning.
haven't seen those. The zit videos, I get it because it's like it's the same thing with the housing renovation videos. Where it's like, oh, okay, this is. I don't know. It does something for me where it's like, oh, okay. And the zit videos, every time I see them, I'm like, ooh, gross, ew. But then I have to watch because like, I'm like, oh, well, what's gonna happen? You know? What's
Dan
gonna happen?
Fan, what is it for you? What's your guilty pleasure?
I like the videos where the cute turtle eats a strawberry. That's
Those
good.
are
shit.
good.
Very
See, that's
true.
Good. We can
Like
watch
those
the
as
turtle
well.
eat a strawberry.
For me, my guilty pleasure is the Tim and Eric videos, especially
Can't get
the
enough of them.
can't get enough. Yeah, I watch them on repeat, especially the On Cinema Oscar special. I don't know if you guys watch On Cinema, if you know what that is.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, Aydin, how would you describe On Cinema? Because I don't even know if you can describe it properly.
It's avant-garde, I suppose. Is that, you think, a good way of describing it?
It feels like a spoof of Siskel and Ebert kind of stuff. It's a little bit of that. Like
In
a
the-
parody
in
or
a
an
way.
exaggeration of it.
But there's so many levels to it. I'm not going to
Yeah.
describe everything.
Yeah,
but
it's not just like that's the core premise is two guys talking about a movie.
Mhm.
Yes.
But it's so much weirder than that because they go so far off into the just nightmares.
And
Right.
there's characters behind that. There's, for example, with Tim Heidecker's character, he is this Trump supporting guy who's Republican, but also he what's the best way to say it? He has this absolute hatred for everything that his partner, and he doesn't even call him a partner. I know you hate Tim and Eric. The Sam Hyde, I get it. I don't care. Listen,
Well, I
mean,
don't
you know,
I
yeah.
really don't like Tim Heidecker because of the shit he's done. I've
yes.
seen some of his more recent stuff. And by the way, I don't think that politics should influence media unless the politic becomes the media, right? So
True. But with On Cinema, I think he's doing it to such a genius level that even for the people who are Trump supporters, yes, you have to listen. There was
I've watched
an
a bit
episode.
of it and I was out. Like I just couldn't.
You have to
couldn't
watch.
hang with it.
Okay, you have to watch the whole thing, including the
I-
trial of
yeah.
Tim Heidecker. And it
Lev,
just-
I don't have that kind of time. I got memes to post, man. I got
Yeah,
D&D
Charles-
games. I got
This
stuff
is-
Charles has
going
got
on.
memes to post on Twitter, and Charles is, of course, the biggest memer on Twitter.
Of
So
course.
he's got important
There
work
is
to
that-
do.
very important work. There's no free time. No, but
Yeah,
as far
it
as
never ends.
as far as something that I would put time into, just as far as something I consider to be a work of genius, I would say that it is On Cinema. I cannot speak more highly of On Cinema.
I
What
watched.
hap-
I
what
watched
hap-
some old Ren
I've
and
seen little
Stimpies.
bits of it, but what I've seen, I've been kind of like, on. So
because
if you have to watch the whole thing-
because you're seeing the individual episodes, and the individual episodes, they don't do justice to the entire thing. It's like you have to get the whole thing in, and then you understand it.
It's like
Then you
one of those
Wait a minute,
understand.
paintings
wait a minute,
Oprah
Lev.
would always
How
have
many-
Yes.
on, where it's 1,000 pictures of like war vets, and then it pulls out and it's actually Oprah's face.
Lev, how many hours are you suggesting that I spend to watch this?
Only
crap?
9,000.
I'm not gonna say. I mean, it has been around for a while, but look at it
I
this way.
know.
Look at it this way. I don't play video games. I don't watch TV. I hardly watch any movies. I just watch.
See, that's where you're
on
messing
cin-
up. I watched Dune.
I just
made
watch
the
on
time to
cinema.
watch Dune this morning.
I just watch on cinema.
Which
That's
one?
all I watch.
the new Dune.
Did you like it?
Ate it. It wasn't. It didn't go as creative and big as the old Dune. I feel like I'm due. I just bought a box set of the Dune books. I was like, I'm due to read Dune again. We got to find out. We got to see how it holds up because 15-year-old Charlie really loved it. Let's see what 35-year-old Charlie feels about it.
I'm getting real fucking upset, or not upset, nervous, because my two favorite series are probably. I know that they're being optioned to be made into TV shows and movies. Because what is not at this point? So Kingkiller Chronicle and Stormlight Archive are almost definitely about to be optioned if they haven't already. Stormlight Archive probably not so much because the author is very autistic, and I think he will not allow that. Kingkiller. He's probably trying to sell that shit as fast as possible because he is very bad at writing in terms of keeping up on his work. But if you don't know, the guy who writes the Stormlight Archive is the guy who finished Wheel of Time.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. All right, guys.
Brando Sando.
Yeah, I feel like we really got out in the weeds here.
Yes. Before
when this was about comic books.
Oh God, those were the days, weren't they, fellas?
They're changing the Punisher's logo because of its use from right-wing groups. I would love to see right-wing groups just use the new symbol. Just all of them.
Just do it.
100%. Just take that new symbol, and that's the symbol.
Definitely. Maverick Christian, $2. Damn fan needs to talk more. Yeah, that's right. Damn fan. You've been so shy. What's...
I mean, I'm always like this. Whenever anyone invites me on a live stream, I'll end up just like listening to everyone else and not talking as much.
The panel shows it's a weird skill set to kind of get used to because you don't want to talk over somebody. But if I get a good joke that I want to cram in, I got to go for it at the same time. So I'm just going to try to pick your spots for that sort of stuff.
I unfortunately have the opposite problem due to autism. Of like, I'll be like, oh, I'll just never shut up.
Yeah.
My bad. So you tell me to shut up.
I always call it autism, like AUGHT. You ought people who say you ought to do this, you ought to do that. Yeah. Autism. No, not autism as in cute. Autism as in you ought to do this, you ought to do that. Yeah, exactly.
I have more of the autism.
Yeah, if I get annoying, just tell me to shut the fuck up. I don't have the capacity to tell if I'm being annoying.
No. You're always cool. Listen, okay, I'll give you one final example of why I like On Cinema, and I'm gonna drop On Cinema. No more On Cinema. Okay, here's the example. Okay,
how's the diversity on cinema?
It's not bad, actually. They got this new black guy named Roy LaRue who does this rap, and he was rapping. He was like a QAnon dude, and he was rapping about like our country's like an empty cup, waiting for the people to rise on up. Lock and load as the bombs explode. Deep state coming for you down the road. Raise the flag, red, white, and blue. Use your mind like Roy LaRue. Build the wall, just stand tall. Hold on, the last lyric was like the best.
I'm intentionally
don't kneel before you click. Don't kneel before you throw the ball. In referencing to people who kneel down. And anyway, so that was Roy LaRue. But beyond Roy LaRue, there was a bit that I really loved, where they got this old guy who claimed to be James Dean, who faked his own death, and wrote a book about it. And Tim Heidecker is incredibly hateful of all of these old-timey people that his co-host Greg Turkington brings on the show, because in a way I think it symbolizes decay. Like Greg is always into like popcorn classics where he brings up these movies that not a lot of people care about from the 1980s and so on and so forth, and he showcases them. And they're all on VHS, by the way. That's the other thing, because his co-host considers VHS to be the proper medium for watching movies. And so Tim always sets fire to his VHS collection and just does horrible things to all the people that he wants to bring in. So he wanted to bring in, and he brought in the guy who claims to be James Dean. And so they decided to do a DNA test in order to prove whether this was the real James Dean. And how they did it was that his co-host who brought him in had he discovered his pants, his jeans, James Dean's original jeans from Rebel Without a Cause that were kept in this museum of the stars or whatever. And he said that we found a piece of James Dean's hair in the zipper area of the genes. So if we study this piece of hair, we will determine whether or not this guy who claims to be James Dean is James Dean. And as it was discovered, this old guy, the DNA test proved correct. But that did not mean that he's James Dean.
Huh.
What did it mean? Do you get it or no? No?
Whether or not I get it, do I like it? That's the better question.
Okay, I'll tell you what it was. So the spoiler is that because the DNA of hair, because the DNA was extracted from the hair that was on the genes area. You get it now, right?
Oh, okay.
So this old guy pretending to be James Dean was actually James Dean's lover. So that's what I'm saying. That's the genius behind On Cinema.
Yeah,
that's just a portion of it.
Like, there's a lot of rumors about
yeah.
what James Dean was up to. Like,
Is that even if that's true, which I'll believe it's true?
that's what I heard.
It's somebody who was James Dean's lover, or someone who just got James Dean's pants?
No, because these were in his pants. They were in the museum. He did not bring those pants in. So his hair was found in the zipper.
It belongs in a museum.
Yeah, it was in a
I'm
museum.
saying, yes, and how could you prove that because there was someone else's hair on it that it meant that they were gay lovers?
It was in the zipper area of the jeans that James Dean wore.
Well, let me tell you something. I don't know
of this
James
old guy who claims to be James Dean. I mean, this entire story is fictional, just so you know. This is not a real story.
Well, let me
I thought it
tell
was a
you
real story.
No, this is entire. That's my point. This whole thing was a work of fiction
It's a
for
Tim
On
Heidecker
Cinema.
bit about
Yes.
it's
Well,
like
there
some
could be all
homophobia
kind- but
thing
like
they were
that-
doing.
That's the kind of thing that could be spun if it was a real story into all kinds of ways. But all I know for a fact is that I have bleached my hair every year for the last 5 years. So I have bleach white hair that is down like past my shoulders, and it comes off very easily because it's been bleached. So if you were to like do a forensic analysis of my apartment, there's my hair all over my husband's clothing. Right? Like
Yes,
it
but
would
now
look very
you're
bad for
being
him.
now you're being overly detailed about it. Where
I'm just saying.
Oh.
Problem with the story. I'm not
No,
saying
no.
it's an incorrect story. Just saying problem with the story.
no, but this is kind of like a well, actually moment that kind of ruins the story, that they tried to set up here, because they were pointing to, it's like, yes, there could have been other ways that this hair got to here, but this was a hair that belonged to this old guy who claimed to be James Dean. So
Yeah, well, guess what? Okay, if I'm brushing my hair,
no, but that's you
my-
brushing your hair. That's you brushing your hair.
my husband was literally down here like 10 seconds ago. He could have told you how annoyed he is the fact that my hair ends up in his fucking drawers. Do you know what I mean? Like
No,
on total accident.
No, but already, hold your horses. Already, you're talking about having a relationship with somebody. It's you and your husband. So your husband's hair could have gotten in your jeans, or your hair would have gotten in his jeans.
My hair is everywhere.
Yeah.
I shed like a cat, man.
So here we have an old man who's claiming to be this famous young actor who tragically died too young in the 1950s. So you would think that, okay, this is just like some imposter, who went in there. The DNA test is obviously going to prove that he is not James Dean, while the DNA proved that he was James Dean because his hair was in the jeans.
I got you.
Finally, we are at peace.
Sorry, I couldn't understand for a minute. I got you.
No problem. But that's just like one taste of the kind of things that go on here. Plus, Tim, he has this doctor named Dr. San who gives him all this alternative treatment. Like, he puts the acupuncture needles in his face, and it causes a face infection that he has to go get treated afterwards. And then he does not get, I'm not going to say the V word, but he does not get the V word for his...
Acupuncture is great. Don't knock it.
All right.
A vasectomy?
A different kind of V word for his son, who he named for his son, who he named vampirism. For his son, who he named Tom Cruise Jr. That was the name that he gave to his son because he wanted him to be a famous actor. His son was the son of Ayaka, who was this Japanese girl that ended up staying with him. But that's a whole other story.
Fuck is
And,
this?
and that's what I'm saying. It's like the
It's so
greatest thing in the
complicated,
world.
It's needlessly complicated.
And then
listen,
it's not
I've
needless
got X-Men
complicated.
lore. I've got X-Men lore in my head. I don't need more bullshit. Let me
yeah,
tell you all
that's-
about Excalibur and X-Force and
Wait,
X-Factor.
wait, hold on. I got to finish this
All
though.
right.
So Tom Cruise Jr. did not get you know what, and when he got sick, Dr. San went out foraging for herbs in their garden, and he was trying to use magnets, and he was like applying the incense, and it did
Well,
nothing.
incest,
Freudian slip
It-
there.
It did nothing, and Tom Cruise Jr. ended up dying. And so Tim Heidecker, being the father, he had like this dumb like fake beard on, like when you paint a beard, like makes it look like you have stubble. He had that on, and they were doing an episode that was dedicated to R.I.P. Tom Cruise Jr. And then all of them, including the doctor, who Tim admitted, you did everything you could, and it was probably like him like. Dr. Sand said that if the son were to have been taken to the hospital earlier, then he would have died earlier, because the hospitals, they're all like death machines. So Tim ended up having like this tribute song to Tom Cruise, and he said like, "Oh, it's a bummer." That's how he described the death of his own son. He called it a bummer. And again, this is why I think On Cinema is just a brilliant universe, because you have this character that's like, I can't even describe it. It's amazing. So anyway, we have a comment from
I like Tim Heidecker. I really don't understand what you just fucking said, to be honest. but I'll have to look into it.
Please
to see
look
if I
into
can
it.
Understand it.
Please look into it. Look at the trial of Tim Heidecker. It's good. Just watch that. Watch the entire trial. Anyway, we have a super chat from Maverick Christian, $5. Hi, Aydin. I'm on the autism spectrum too, albeit only mildly so. Guy diagnosed a few years ago, well into my 30s.
Yeah, it was hang on. Goddamn. One sec.
Everything all right? What is going on?
No, I literally just like swallowed air wrong.
Okay.
This is going great. So I was diagnosed with autism when I was 21 years old. When I was diagnosed, I told the doctor to go fuck himself. I'm not joking. I told him, "You can go fuck yourself. How fucking dare you say this shit about me?" I was very upset about the diagnosis. Well, I didn't like
friendliness of youth.
Yeah, I didn't like it at all that he called me autistic, because to me it was an insult, right? And then it wasn't until about like 8 years later that I had to be in a mental institution, and for other reasons, and they were like, "Oh, okay," because at first they diagnosed me like bipolar and a bunch of other stuff. I'm like, "Oh wait, never mind," because you have to understand too, autism in females is very rare. Well, comparatively rare. To males. It made me very mad for a long time in my life to be autistic, but now I don't really give a shit. It's like whatever. It does make me a little bit awkward in social situations, and if I don't understand something sometimes, I do apologize. It's not intentional. But autism is just something we all have. Those of us who have it have to learn to deal with, and you got to learn how to. It's mostly a social problem, so you got to learn how to deal with it socially. That's all.
Is it a condition where you put certain things, certain feelings, group them together in your mind? Like you put would the analogy be that you would put all the Gundams together with the Gundams and all the Sailor Moon figures with the Sailor Moon figures? Is that the... No? You wouldn't like
I would
compartmentalize your emotions?
No, I was misdiagnosed with bipolar because the way that... Right. So when you talk about bipolar disorder, we're probably mostly here aware of it, but just be aware of what... to reiterate what bipolar disorder is. The bipolar disorder is characterized by about long periods of depression and then short periods of mania or hypomania depending on the type of bipolar it is. Now, if you're reacting to things bizarrely, that can look like bipolar to an analyst, right? It could look like, oh, you're just being manic right now, or something like that, and not understand that it's actually not mania. It's that you've got autism. So I was misdiagnosed with bipolar, and that's why they gave me lithium, which, oh my God, please do not fucking take this drug unless you absolutely need to take it, because lithium will fuck you up. Lithium is a poison. By definition, it is a poison. I'm not saying if you need to take it, you need to take it. But by definition, lithium is a poison. Be very careful about that drug. The reality is that no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. But I mean, no one expects an adult female who's never presented with it to have autism. Because
the chief weapons are fear and surprise.
Well, also, autism wasn't really recognized until I was an adult. So it was... a whole different thing. That being said, you cannot use something like autism as an excuse for your own problems with processing special situations, right? You can say like, "Oh, sorry about that," etc., etc. And as I've apologized here, before for being autistic, but ultimately we do have to deal with our own problem,
Definitely. And lithium, that's also found in cell phones, by the way. I don't know if there is a connection there, like the cell phone batteries. Those are made out of lithium ion.
No, it's a different type of lithium. The stuff that's in the pills, it's been prescribed to people to prevent serious psychological dysfunction for about 100 years. You'll be very careful because you can get something called lithium shakes if it's over-prescribed. As in, it's a seizure that's caused by lithium. It's one of the most extreme mental health drugs that exists in the world. And it was prescribed to me because they thought, well, looks like you maybe have bipolar. And I just went, okay. It did not help anything for me. I just took it and then I went, okay, well, I'm supposed to be better now, but I wasn't. Be careful about your mental health diagnoses, friends.
Yeah, I knew a girl back in, my ex-girlfriend in college. She ended up having a shitty day, went to the shrink, and they gave her antidepressants. And now all of a sudden, is it the fact that we're finding out that antidepressants...
Exactly. Do nothing.
That they
do nothing. We're seeing this now. It's just coming out now.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. He's not doing anything.
The SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, do nothing.
I believe it.
Well, no, it's you don't have to believe it. It's been published in the mainstream media now. It was published in a bunch of studies. The serotonin reuptake inhibitors, the SSRIs.
The question though is they do nothing, but they do something as far as they still change people.
They change your brain chemistry, but they don't do anything to help your depression.
So what exactly do they make you do? The SSRIs.
That's the question. What we do know about SSRIs is that they have a very high correlation with suicidal ideation and increased depression. So
it's pretty wild that we gave people who are depressed a medicine that makes them more depressed and suicidal.
How curious, right?
Has that warning on it. It's like, may cause depression. Oh, thanks.
Yeah, my antidepressant medication is like, it may cause depression, may cause suicidal ideation. What the hell is this?
What won't cause that stuff? The Amazing Spider Ham. That's a comic book that would inspire laughter and fun in anybody who picks that one up.
Yeah, I know.
Strongly recommend it. Listen, Lev, there's a character in there called the Goose Rider, who's a spoof of the Ghost Rider. I love that damn comic book as a kid.
I love geese, by the way. There was this farm that I went to. They had the security system geese there. They when they see you, they tilt their heads down and they start going at you like a torpedo. And it's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
Geese are great. Listen, guys, this is the end of the stream. What are you still doing here? Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, breaktherules.tv, patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron today. There's going to be a lot of big guests coming up right now, and I really appreciate everybody watching. So, yeah, Take care, everybody. Have a good night. Anything you guys want to plug, by the way, before we go? Dan Fan. By the way, your name also sounds a bit like Don Fan, the Pokemon. I don't know if you ever got that before.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times.
So, Dan Fan, anything you want to plug before we go?
Yeah, I guess, you can find me with the name Dan Fan. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube being the most popular one. I also do my own comics, so feel free to check those out as well.
Everybody subscribe to Dan Fan at Trisha Cuffari on Twitter. TRISHACUFFARI. And Aydin Paladin, anything you got down the pipeline?
Yeah, I have a new video that will be out probably within the next 4 or 5 days, depending on how it works out, on the housing crisis and how home ownership affects people. That'll be I've been working on that for a couple weeks. That'll be up next. I feel like this is my communist video that I didn't mean to make. I'll be maybe in like I hate capitalism, but it's the way that it is. So if you'd like to learn more about the housing crisis, it will be here. Hello, garbage truck. That'll be it.
And finally, Charlie Kahn, Mass Bastard, what are you working on?
Oh, listen, I've got memes all over Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I've got the YouTube channel. I've got some D&D videos coming up. Me and my friend Fetusberry. I ran a one-on-one campaign with him, so that'll be going up soon of us playing D&D and me doing lots of silly voices as we tell a story of adventure. The Real Weird Sickos podcast, we've had a lot of big guests on. We just had Vsauce 2 on.
Nice.
We had Mudahar on. We've had a lot of big, crazy guests. Like, we're punching way above our weight class. It's real weird.
Hell yeah, man.
Ruben Sim we just had on. That was a good one. People should listen to that one. He's the Roblox guy that got sued for over $1 million.
Yeah.
But I got lots of memes everywhere. If everybody likes memes and weird stuff. I started the retro account on Twitter. I do lots of stuff. I got a lot of things cooking.
Excellent. Everybody subscribe to Real Weird Sickos. And thank you guys so much for watching. You can follow me on Twitter at LevPo, LEVPO. And once again, subscribe to Break the Rules, breaktherules.tv. And that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Mwah!